Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Levi Page. Pat, tell us what happened with your book that you wrote on the Madeleine McCann case, the profile, and basically Amazon has yanked it off their site, from what I'm understanding. What's going on there?
Yes, they have. I just got word from them. They just wrote me a nice letter. Amazon said, we have received a notice of defamation from Carter Ruck solicitors that says the content of the book contains defamatory statements regarding their clients, Jerry and Kate McCann. Because we have no method of determining whether this content is defamatory, we're removing the title and will not reinstate it unless the McCanns and you agree to put it back up. So I have, as they call it, it's called being Carter Rucked. And the Carter Ruck solicitors for the McCanns, they have sued, I forgot what it's up to now, something like 9 people, including the detective on the case. Anybody who speaks out has a theory that the McCanns may have been involved in some kind of part of what happened to their daughter outside of the neglect issue. Anybody who has a theory, and that's all my profile was a theory, and I stated over and over, it's a theory. It is not a fact, and I'm not saying they're guilty of anything. So I see nothing defamatory in it. But it is absolutely amazing that somebody can make that claim, and without any kind of legal backing in that, any proof that Amazon could just remove your book from circulation. So, yes, I've been Carter Rucked, as they call it.
Wow.
Wow.
Can anybody, can our listeners contact Amazon and let them know, listen, we like what Pat Brown has to say, and if we want to read her book, we should have the choice to do that, and you, Amazon, should have the guts to put it out there, even though you're being bullied by the McCann camp.
They can do so. I have heard that Carter Ruck has done this before for other clients, and that has not, and they've never been able to get their books back up. And not only that, apparently, that if you have it on your Kindle, but you did not download it personally to your computer, apparently when they're revoking it, that person can no longer access it, which is an interesting thing because they paid for it. So I guess they should have to give back everybody's money.
Well, maybe they should sue whoever that is. Who is the person bringing this lawsuit?
Excuse me?
Who's bringing this lawsuit? The McCanns, and who's their attorney?
No, there's no lawsuit. Only thing that has happened is Carter Ruck, which those are the lawyers for the McCanns, have simply told Amazon that the material is defamatory, and they pulled it on the basis of being told by somebody that there's some defamatory material, which I think is bizarre because think about it. You could pretty much pull half the books off of Amazon because somebody said something. As a matter of fact, Amaral and a few other people could accuse Kate McCann of putting defamatory stuff in her book and have it pulled. So, I mean,
well, you know what, Pat, we're going to have you back on the show to talk about the McCann case. I'll get into contact with you about that because I think the entire thing is interesting in their conduct. Obviously, they don't like what you have to say, and maybe they're afraid of what you have to say. We'll have you back. Pat Brown, good night, everybody. Hope you all have a great night. I'll be back Thursday, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. Good night, everybody.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another Saturday afternoon. Well, afternoon for me, but 8:30 p.m. for you. And boy, am I excited today. We've got Pat Brown here, as you could probably guess. And she is such an amazing person. I had a chat with her. She has done so many things. She's so involved. She's such a great profiler. And we'll learn all about that very shortly. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here, of course, and the mods. Don't forget the mods, otherwise Shirley gets at me. And also today, there's always something that happens on a Saturday And sadly, I had my brother-in-law, or I just heard about my brother-in-law pass away. So the avatar I use today is from the last time I saw him when I was at his barbecue. So my little thought for him today. Rest in peace, Rod. Now, there's a lot about Pat regarding the Madeleine McCann case, but I do want to introduce you to something prior to that. What's happened now is that she's just written a book. It's nothing, now this is not to do with Madeleine, but it's really important to understand all about Pat and where she's coming from. And a recent book, which has just been published, is called Black and White. Now, as I said, this is nothing to do with Madeleine, but this is just part of Pat's persona, you know, what she deals with. And there was a recent interview, which because of copyright, I couldn't actually show you. This is a clip from it. Her and her son wrote the book, and I'm sure she'll tell you all about it. Now, what I've also learnt, again, not to do with Madeleine, but this just totally blew me away, is that she's also written a book on Cleopatra. And apparently she went to Egypt, she went to the tombs, and apparently she's discovered that there was no snake involved. And since then, there has not been any reference to a snake. She basically changed history, did our Pat. So there was no way I could not let you know that. She's done lots of other books. There are Only the Truth, Killing for Sport, Inside the Mind of Serial Killers, The Profiler, My Life Hunting Serial Killers and Psychopaths, 10 missing and murdered children's cases that have nothing to do with Madeleine, How to Save Your Daughter's Life. Apparently, this is an absolutely great book and highly recommended, especially for those with daughters. So, of course, which was referenced in the video just now, it was just amazing that she was blocked by Amazon, banned. She was not allowed to have the Madeleine book on Amazon. It was just shocking at the time. I remember that. And that's why I did that video. But I think before I go any further, I just wanted to get all that in. I mean, she's such an amazing lady and done so much to the case, to the Madeleine case. We've all known about Pat for many, many years. And I think at this point, it's a good time to bring up Pat to us. Okay.
Hi, Lizzie.
Welcome, Pat.
Thank you.
I thought I'd get through all of those before you came on,
Well,
so that
you. I love all
you
the
wouldn't
photos
stop me,
and
because I know you really want
like
to
20
just
years old.
focus on Madeleine.
So, have I lost Lizzie already? She may be gone. So anyway, until Lizzie comes back, I'm going to talk to everybody out there. Lizzie gave a great introduction.
Golly. Now,
you're back, Lizzie. Okay, I was going to go on without you. So yeah.
oh yeah. Well, you know, all of us are like that. Now, can I just ask? I was losing power then. Was it just me, or was it generally?
I think it was just you.
It was just you, Lizzie. I was fine.
Have we lost her again?
Shirley,
I think so.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can anybody hear
you? Can you hear us?
Yes.
So, well, I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay, Pat?
I absolutely can hear you right now. Yes. If I hear a dead silence, I'll keep going till we get you back. So, but I hear you.
And Shirley, I'm having a little difficulty here. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Yeah, it's just her.
It is
Okay.
just her.
She'll be back in a minute. So, Pat, why don't you go ahead with what you were saying?
Okay. Well, it really was nice. Lizzie brought in all the many, many years that I've done a lot of things, written a lot of books. I've been in profiling for over 2 decades. And I've done things on the side because it's nice to have something to think about besides homicide and gruesome murder scenes. So some people ask me, how do you handle those kind of things? I say, I have a life outside of profiling. I have family, I have friends, I have pets, I travel, so I can keep a balanced life. But I've done but profiling has been a great part of my life. And the Madeleine McCann case obviously was a very huge case, which everybody's been fascinated with for years. And people wonder how come it's still holding people's attention. And I think it is one of the biggest mysteries. I don't personally think it's so much a mystery might exactly what happened to Madeleine, but a mystery as to why everything is still not been proven, and the truth has not come out after a decade and a half now. And so I think this is going to continue like this until something breaks. But it's been a real interesting ride with the Maddie thing. And one of the things people, some people got mad at me when I wrote my book. They're like, oh, you actually charged some money for the book. You're just trying to make money off of Madeleine. I'm like, if I wanted to make money, I would have been on the McCann side. Because don't you think the McCanns would have liked to have a criminal profiler fight for them, come out for them, be on all the television shows? Because if I had been on the McCann side, I would have done a lot of American television and British television. They would have had me on to talk about that. I would have been in all the documentaries, and I would have made lots of money, except for the fact that when I examined the evidence, I could not quite support the concept that the McCanns were totally not involved with what happened to Madeleine. So have I made money off of Madeleine? I can honestly say absolutely not. What little money I made off of charging a very small, what I had to pretty much charge something to put the book on the internet. No. I spent hours and hours, hundreds of hours analyzing the case and talking about the case. And so, no, I'm not making money off of Madeleine. And that's never been my interest. I like everybody else, find it a pretty fascinating case. It's like it's so bizarre the way it's gone on and all the details that keep coming out. Even this year, this new thing with Christian Brueckner, suddenly the new suspect that Germany has, and now there's a new show coming out all about that. So it never stops. So it's hard to just walk away from it and not get involved in it because it does keep going on. So, hey, is Lizzie back?
Yes, I think I'm back.
There you are.
I think, for some reason I suddenly lost my internet, wouldn't you know? But there we go. So thanks so much, Pat. And sorry that I don't know when I disappeared. I was either talking to myself or sounding silly. But anyway, great to have you back.
To yourself, so you can not worry about that.
I have to do it all the time, believe me. So, yeah. And you were just mentioning about Christian Brueckner. Right. And I've said before that it's one, because I absolutely do not believe that Madeleine was abducted, I have never taken an interest in Christian Brueckner, except I did listen to Mark Selnokonoko's podcast.
That was awesome.
Which, yeah, it was. Absolutely. And I'm always promoting it. And in fact, you've done some interviews with Mark, right?
Correct. I've taken a stance since I've been libeled and by media outlets about the Madeleine McCann case. I've been on shows where I've been edited so that I said things I didn't say, and since then I've taken a stance against doing anything to do with pretty much any kind of media speaking out on any case, because I just don't trust what they put out. But I do have a few people that I have earned my trust in the media, and if they want me to do something, I will, because I know they're ethical, and Mark is one of them. So anytime Mark would give me a call to want to talk about something and go on air, I would definitely do something with Mark. He's one of the few true journalists left out there.
Absolutely, and I'm always promoting and encouraging people to watch, particularly his podcasts, but he's got a new one out with Christian Brueckner in it. And it's really the only thing I've heard about Christian Brueckner. And that was him talking. Mark was talking to the prosecutor, who didn't seem to know a thing. I think I know more than he does.
No, you are actually describing that accurately, because I listened to that broadcast as well, and I'm thinking to myself, perhaps the prosecutors, what purpose did you serve going on a show to say constantly, well, I'm not exactly sure, I don't know, we don't know. I'm like, you're the prosecutor, you're supposed to be, this is the biggest case ever, and you don't know anything. And he literally did not know anything. The only thing he ever brought out in the show was, we believe that Madeline was murdered, and we believe Brueckner did it. But there was not a shred of anything that supported that argument. And he then goes on to say, well, we need more evidence to prove that he did it. Well, okay, what kind of evidence do you need to prove that he did it? We need her body. We need a forensic evidence of any sort. We need, photos. We need witnesses. I'm like, I don't know, but if I have a case that has absolutely none of that, there's no way you're going to prosecute. There's no way maybe you shouldn't even think he did it. And so I'm like, what in the world do you have to even begin to think that he did it? Outside of your own conclusion that he's a creepy dude and was living in the area. I mean, I can tell you, if anybody's ever pulled up one of those, those predator charts, who's in your neighborhood type thing, all the sexual perverts in your neighborhood. I mean, they're scattered everywhere. So, just because something happens in a neighborhood, it doesn't mean a particular person did it, because it could actually be 50, 100 suspects in that area. And maybe even some you don't even know exist, which is why they can get away with things. But just because this creepy dude lived in the area doesn't mean he had anything to do with Madeleine McCann. And unless you have evidence that literally links him to the crime, you got nothing. And you shouldn't be going around saying he committed the crime. Nothing to back it. You look like an idiot.
Well, not only that, Mark had previously asked him if there was, if he was able to ask him any questions, and he said yes, he wasn't going to stop any questions. That's even before I heard him. It sounded odd. You'd think he'd have some.
He said you could ask any questions. He just didn't answer any of them. But
oh yeah, okay, okay. That's
you can ask me anything too. I mean,
that puts the perspective on it, right?
Right.
And
I want to say the most interesting thing from the interview I thought was this was the thing I thought was the most bizarre, was when people who don't understand what the supposed link at all for Christian Brueckner and Madeleine McCann is that he made supposedly a cell phone call that pinged off the tower right there at the club. And so Mark had already investigated the fact that there wasn't a tower and there was a huge area around it. So just because something pings off a tower doesn't mean it's, this coordinate point, like right there. It could be 20 miles from there. So he asked a very reasonable question. What is the range that if he made a phone call in that area, what would be the range? And the prosecutor couldn't answer. Well, I don't know what the range is. Excuse me. You have investigated this case.
Crazy.
This is your number one thing that says we know he was there, and you have a clue to what the range on the tower was. I mean, the basic thing you don't understand or know anything about. So he's either completely lying about that, or he's an idiot. And I'm going to go with lying, because I mean, I cannot believe. He can argue me with that and say, well, how could you say such a terrible thing? You're slandering me. I'm like, well, anybody worth their salt, anybody who works in that kind of business, any investigator on a case, or any prosecutor who says he has enough to prosecute, would know the most basic information and can't say he doesn't know. He could say, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to admit that, boy, he could have been like 5 towns over, but he said, I don't know. And I was like, wow. I mean, your case sucks. I mean, it's so bad that there's no credibility to it whatsoever. And, and he's got nothing. He literally has nothing. And yet the media has jumped all over this and is pushing this as, oh my God, see, here's the guy that kidnapped Maddie and possibly killed her off.
Well, this is why I wanted to ask you, because I haven't had chance to watch the Discovery Plus documentary on Maddie, which was on last week. I was going to watch it last night, but I was really interested in chatting to you. So that was much better than that. And I thought I'd ask you what you thought of the Discovery documentary.
Well, I'd rather eat rat poison than watch that.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't ask you before. I
did not watch it because one of the things I've stopped doing
Oh,
is watching documentaries, which I know are so slanted and are more propaganda tools than anything else. I understand the media does a lot of this because this is one of the reasons, again, I don't participate in a lot of documentaries anymore, because I've been brought into documentaries only to be stabbed in the back because they have an agenda going in. They're not interested in the truth. They're not interested in balance even, which is one of the very frustrating things, is that, you know, if you're going to do something and you're not sure exactly what happened, or you are not experts on it, at least allow it to be balanced. Bring in people with, they could be opposing views. You present this evidence, this person presents this evidence. We're not going to embarrass anybody. We're not going to knock them down. We're not going to mock them. So, you know, we're not going to bring you on, which has happened to me. They brought me on and then they edited me and then they made fun of me. We edited out everything that I said. And then I look like an idiot. And then you go, she's an idiot. Because they really didn't want my evidence presented. They wanted to make sure that since I was on this side, that this side would look bad. And consequently, it's so unethical and it's so unuseful. So if somebody came out and was doing a proper study of a particular case, and then we would see experts presenting their opinions and allowing a good debate or a good discussion or just a good information source from all places, without the nastiness and without the viciousness and without the phoniness. And I know darn well these days that the documentary coming out of Madeleine McCann is always going to be pro McCann, and they're going to present a completely fabricated presentation of the case, and it's going to be pointless. So quite frankly, I don't usually waste my time. So,
okay. Well, I get that.
Unless somebody comes to me and says, oh my God, Pat, you're never going to believe this. There's a balanced program. Then I'll go watch it. But nobody comes and says that to me. So,
well, funnily enough, and one thing which I think we should address here is that both of us believe in what we believe. And this is why I'm really happy to have you on, because we do have some issues which we don't have the same thoughts about,
correct.
Which is absolutely great. And the reason I think it's great is because being on here every Saturday, everybody hears my side, not my side, but my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I base them on facts and I believe in them. But also, you have different thoughts. You're a criminal profiler of a great high standard, may I say. And you go by evidence. Some of the things I put past you, you won't even touch because it's not part of the evidence. And I'd love for you to explain your thoughts. Now, here we go. Pat, the big question. Now, Pat Brown, what's your thoughts on Maddie? Sorry, I had to do that.
This is an inside joke.
Yeah. But you have different thoughts on the Smith sighting. A lot of people are interested in the Smith sighting. I always try and stay away from it because it's something which, although I believe in the Smiths, that they saw somebody, it could have been Jerry, it might have been, I've never believed it was Maddie. And this is the interesting bit, folks. I have personally never believed that Jerry McCann would walk through the streets with Madeleine after blood was found and she's dead, carrying her in a blanket. That's my main thought and why I don't touch or talk much about the Smith sighting. But Pat said something to me last night and I said, okay, stop right there because I'd like to discuss it. She disagrees with me and I want to hear why. I want to hear what that's about. Why you think that Jerry could be walking through the streets with Maddie dead.
Let me tell you just the basic about that, and then let me tell you the real reason the Smith sighting is the most interesting point in this entire case for me. Worked a lot of cases, and there are behaviors people exhibit. There are behaviors that guilty people exhibit, and there are behaviors that not guilty people exhibit. In other words, parents of missing children who are not involved, they have a whole array of behaviors which are pretty standard across the board. And then there's another group which are not so innocent, and they also have, interestingly, very similar kinds of behaviors. So let's go to the first one is, if this were indeed Jerry carrying away Madeline, would a parent take their child, just walk her down the street with her? Do you know this is not the only case where this has supposedly happened? There have been other cases. There's one in, and I'm trying to remember where it was because it's been so long. I think it was in Ohio. I think there was a baby, and a guy was seen carrying the baby down the street. So, again, like this. And what happens in some of these instances is we think that, oh my God, something has happened on purpose or not so on purpose. And then the parent who's involved would concoct some brilliant plan to cover up whatever. And in fact, what happens is massive panic. I mean, this is, let's say it's an accident, but you think you're going to end up in prison, and then you just think all horrible things are going to happen. You panic. There was a woman she hit a guy with a car, and he went up on top of her hood. She drove all the way home with him, stuck to her windshield, all the way home, and parked him in the garage. And you say, why would she do that? Panic. I mean, it's something that's happened that's, so out of what should have happened, so bizarre, so unbelievable. I mean, you just wake up one day, oh my God, and you're just standing there going, holy crap. And the world has turned upside down. You're in an alternate universe. And you also have very little time to think, to do anything. So there's usually these attempts to do something. And one of the major attempts is to remove the body of the person that you have injured, to get it away from you so you're not found with the body. Simple fact. And are there smarter ways to do that? Absolutely. But in that moment, when your brain is turned to complete mush, people will do all kinds of weird things in that panic. They stop thinking about, they almost black out. It's like you can't even got blinders on. You don't even know what you're doing. You're just half out of it. And so you do strange things. So that if it were true that Jerry came back and found his daughter dead, and he is panicked and he's trying to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to do? And at some point he thinks, I just have to get her away from here, and then I can figure out what else to do. And he just picks her up and he just runs off. And he just goes, because it's, generally speaking, it is dark there. I've been in Praia de Luz, and, it's night, and who knows what he's thinking? He's just off, and he's just off and doing whatever he's doing. So could he have done that? Absolutely. So I can't take away that type of behavior from a person who has just found themselves in this horrific situation. So that's one thing. The other side of it is the actual sighting itself. So you have the Smiths, and they say they saw this man carrying a child that looks like Madeline toward the beach. Now, whether they're accurate in their description, whether everybody saw it, whatever the reasoning is, at the time, the McCanns became aware that there was a second sighting. We had her, her little friend's sighting, and then we had this other sighting. And from the very beginning and forever and a day, pretty much the McCanns ignored this sighting. Now, in the moment, just found out your child is gone missing. And there is a person who said they saw a child that looked like yours being carried toward the beach. Any parent, a parent of a missing child who is not involved, whose child really has been kidnapped, would be after that going insane about that. They'd be running down the street. They'd be beating on the police. That man, I saw him. They saw, maybe he's taking my daughter toward the beach. They would be broadcasting that everywhere. And one of the things I've known over all the years of doing this is one of the frustrating things with parents who have truly have missing children. They think everybody has their kid. I mean, they will not let anything go by. So, you know, it's you could say, oh, well, they were being rational and thinking, no, that doesn't seem reasonable. No. They will think the mailman took their child. They will think a dog took their child. They will think a 3-year-old took their child. It doesn't matter. Anything they can come up with. I have them come to me all the time and go, Pat, you have to investigate this. I think this could be true. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's no way that's true. But it's one more possibility that maybe this is going to get my child back. I don't care how stupid it is. Go figure. It just could be, even if it's 0.001% chance. It might be my child. You can't ignore it. And it's very difficult to deal with parents like that because they want you to spend hundreds of investigating hours on completely ludicrous leads, which aren't even leads.
They're just, and I think a lot of the police time was spent on those kind of leads, and the McCanns couldn't even remember a sighting.
Yeah, exactly. So the McCanns' complete refusal to even recognize this sighting, even when they wrote. And one of the things people asked me why I didn't write my book earlier was because I was still waiting to get it from the horse's mouth. So when Kate wrote her book, then finally I had their point of view written in print, not somebody's version of their point of view or what I think their point of view was. It was written in print, and it was still the issue. They ignored the Smith sighting to a great, great degree. It made no sense for them to ignore that. Even if the guy looked like Jerry, you know what I'd be saying? Damn it, that's great. Guy looks like Jerry. You know, we know what he looks like. He's like Jerry's twin. Go find the dude that looks like Jerry. I mean, I don't care if somebody took one of my children and they happen to be a fake blonde, a blonde woman, you know, with my Germanic British sort of face, and she looks basically like me. Why would I don't care. There's got to be a million women that look like me out in the world. You know, when you're talking about a dark street, you know, somebody's walking down a dark street, they happen to be my height and have this color hair. So what? They basically have okay, who cares? So, you know, there's a lot of guys that look like Jerry, but they don't, so there'd be no reason for them to say, oh, you know, let's not pay attention to that sighting because it might make Jerry look bad. They might look at us then and not, well, I'm going to ignore trying to find my kid because the dude looks like my husband, you know, from Kate's point of view. Or Jerry says, oh, it looks like me. I don't want to find Madeline. That's absolutely outrageous. That will never happen. So the McCanns not being interested in this sighting is one of the number one reasons I have trouble thinking of them believing that their child was kidnapped out of their apartment. If they believed that for sure and they had nothing to do with it, they would have been all over that Smith sighting. I mean, they would have gone crazy about it, and they didn't. Only Jane sighting. Jane sighting, oh yes, we're all about Jane sighting. Jane. It's her, that guy. You know, why that guy, not the other guy? And eventually what they said to try to incorporate the Smith sighting was to say, oh, well, it could have been Madeline, but only if it was the same guy Jane saw and he like ducked into an alley for 40 minutes and came back out again. It's like, you're trying to put the two of them together for what reason? And the only reason that would be true is because Jerry has an alibi for the Jane suspect and not for the Smiths. So therefore you can combine them together. Then if it's Jane's suspect, then Jerry can't be the guy. So, I mean, this kind of stuff that the McCanns came out of their own thinking and mouths is what made me believe that there's something extremely interesting about the Smith sighting and their ignoring of it.
And as Gonzalo Morel claimed, there was a sighting at 9:20, and then 3/4 of an hour later, they're a short distance away. What happened in between? You know, it just didn't make sense.
Right. Well, I say ducked into an alley for 40 minutes and just hit. I mean,
yeah.
It's a very short distance, so it makes no sense. And even if it were true, the fact that the McCanns couldn't believe that there could be two separate sightings makes no sense. Why couldn't the sighting that Jane saw, supposedly, because that's always really still questionable because it's the weirdest thing. At any rate, there's no reason why it couldn't have been two different sightings of two different children, and you don't know which one it is. And again, a parent of a missing child will want you all over both of those sightings and every other possible sighting.
Yeah, their lack of they're just pure lack of wanting to deal with the situation and avoiding it, basically. I mean, they didn't really want to address any of the effort,
right?
Especially the police effort.
They were very, I say, their behaviors as far as parents of missing children were extraordinarily bizarre from the beginning. They remain bizarre to this day, and the things that the way that they approach everything is just, it's so calculated, and it's not what I've seen from parents of missing children who have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Is there something else in the case apart from the Smith sighting that really, in your opinion, pinpoints the fact that she wasn't abducted and that they, as per the police files, hid the body, and that she died, hid the body, and they simulated the abduction? Is there something that for you is proof of that in your mind?
Well, when we go back to even the beginnings of all of this, and people said, who could have taken Madeline? And I'm like, well, it's not a question of who could have taken her. The question is there any evidence that anybody took her? Normally, when you have a child abduction, there's some evidence out there somewhere. I mean, from the original crime scene itself to perhaps a secondary crime scene or even another crime scene. There's something there, especially, a lot of these things aren't as well planned as people believe. It's not like these guys are brilliant. A lot of, child pedophiles and stuff, they see an opportunity and they take an opportunity. They're usually not so calculated and brilliant that they might not leave this tiny of shred of evidence, like, that a footprint or a handprint or some dirt that you carried in from outside through the window, or a broken window, some evidence that somebody came in and took that child away. And that's one of the things that's so frustrating about this. We keep looking for an abductor. So what they're doing is they're not looking at the evidence and then going from the evidence to the theory, and from the theory to their suspects. When I work on a crime, and I've gone into with the police station, sometimes what will happen is when I arrive there, I'll have the detectives come in and they'll go, let me tell you what happened. I'm like, no. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know your theory. I don't want to know who you think did it. Just put me in the room and let me start with the basic evidence. And the first place I always start is with the exact crime scene. I start with all the crime scene photos, the crime scene report, the first police report, the first responders. Start right there. I don't start with the suspects. I start with the crime scene. And from there, I determine what happened at that crime scene. What exactly went on. It's almost like when you start putting the pieces together, it's like rolling a film. This happened first, this happened second, this happened third, this happened fourth. And then you have this idea of how the thing happened. And then from there, you can figure out perhaps why it happened and who was involved with what happened. But you don't, which is what we've seen outside of Portugal. We've seen this with Scotland Yard. Now we see this with Germany. And even some later people are involved in the case, coming in to review things. Don't really review anything. They ignore all the basic evidence, and they go with the assumption or the decision that this is a child abduction when there's no evidence to support that. So they're starting with a motive before they even look at the evidence to support a motive. So that absolutely is ridiculous. You don't do that. That's not the way you analyze a case. So when Scotland Yard came in and already eliminated the McCanns, basically they said we don't need to look at any of the evidence. We're going to start this case as an abduction. And since we have no evidence of an abduction in the house, in the apartment, we'll just skip that. We don't have, since there's nothing there that proves an abduction, we just won't look there anymore. We don't need to even talk to the McCanns anymore because it's an abduction. They're not involved. So we're just going to ignore literally everything that happened at that location. So then what they went with, they decided to do, because they weren't going with the evidence, was, okay, we're going to label this a child abduction. We're going to go into the population and look for all the creepy guys. We're just going to look for creepy guys. And when we find a creepy guy, we'll go dig up his farmland, or we'll go look in his basement if we can get in there, or we'll interview him and try to push him into a confession, because we don't have any evidence to support that anybody actually went in and took the child. We'll just go to all the creepy people and try to link them to the crime. So they're doing it. It's completely backwards, and that's why, if you wonder why there has been no success in all of these years, it's because they're not looking at the evidence. They're just making up stuff and trying to find somebody that fits the bill without the evidence. And so this is what happened with Christian Brueckner too. I mean, he's a creepy dude. Okay, fine. There's other creepy guys in Prindeluge too. He's a creepy guy. And so he's committed a creepy crime. So then they go dig everything up, and guess what they found? Nothing. They've got nothing. I mean, if they had dug everything up and they found Maddie or pictures of him with Maddie, okay, that might be something. And I think in some ways, if they are believing their own story, of child abduction, they're hoping they'll get lucky. We'll just dig everything up. Maybe we'll get lucky. Oh, sorry. I shook my camera. Maybe I'll get lucky and there we'll find something. And of course, I don't really think that's the purpose of Christian Brueckner. I think the purpose is to eventually close the case down with somebody nobody likes. Because if enough people think he's creepy enough, and that's it. Yeah.
And yeah, Gonzalo was talking to Mark Sonokonoko about that, and it was predicted that there would be a German pedophile that would be used to close the case, and this was a couple of years ago, I believe.
Oh, Gonzalo.
And you met Gonzalo, right?
Yes, I did.
When
I had a great time with him. Really great guy. And he's gone through so much to try to bring the truth to light. Gonzalo and I disagree with a few issues, a few theories, not the basic issues, a few theories. He's got one theory and I've slightly got another about what could happen with their body and things like that. But that's not a big deal. The most important thing is he focused on the evidence and followed the evidence. And what he's saying now is they're just trying to close the case down. And for people who have not been around this business, there's a reason eventually that they try to do this. So what happens is sometimes the political pressures get too much. The citizenry gets frustrated. The media is getting annoying. And at a certain point, you just say, we're never going to prove who actually did it. So let's just get this thing buried at this point. The investigation is dead in the water. Let's just bury the thing. And so what can happen is they look for an easy way out. And if you never have to go to court to prove something, it's even better, actually. So the dead pedophile is the best because he's dead, and you can just say he did it. Nobody's going to argue. And the second best is some guy who's so creepy and already up for a crime that's similar. You can just make it look like it could be him. And there's a lot of people out there now who believe this, that Brueckner is the guy because he's creepy and he live nearby. So you can eventually just leave it there. You don't have to prove it. You just close the case. You close it, you don't have to go to court, so you just close the case and you say, well, we've tried this is what they're probably going to say. We know it's him. We have worked on this for like a year, trying, or 2 years or 3 years, whatever. We know it's him, but some cases, we just cannot locate her body, and whatever he's done with the stuff, the photos, whatever he had of her, he's managed to get rid of, maybe burned them all up, and we just cannot prove it in a court of law, which is what the prosecutor is already saying. But if they can make the public believe enough that they believe, because I've had people say this to me, Pat, why do you think you know more than the police? That's it. The police working on this in Germany, that prosecutor's seen everything. Have you seen all the stuff they have? Well, no, I haven't. And they go, well, see, so you have no right to comment on this because you're not them. You're not the police. You're not the ones working on the case. You really, you don't know what they know. And that's how they can close the case down administratively. And in the media, they can just eventually say, it's our guy. And we're not going to be able to take it to court, but it's our guy. And they will never, ever actually have to prove. They will never have to go public and say, this is what we have. And they're not going to.
Do you-
Because like I say, it's still an open case officially. So we can't present our evidence officially because it's still an open case. But we're going to administratively close it, so we don't have to work on it anymore. So it's the best
Well,
way.
do you think that the Portuguese police feel this way? And also, do you think that with such a great Maddie community still fighting for the justice, do you think they'd be able to get away with it if they suddenly chose Brueckner as the proof, the suspect?
Absolutely. Well, what do you think? What do you think? The internet world is going to do about it? You know, what do you think they're going to do? They can't do anything. It's in the hands of the people that run the justice system and the politicians, and they have great power. And the rest of us, you know, who have our beliefs, who've been put out, and I mean, the communities, like your community, has done an amazing job of putting out the information. I mean, there wouldn't be this many people in the world who know the details of the Madeleine McCann case if it hadn't been for people like you, because I mean, that's where I got a lot of my information from you too. See, oh, here's the reports, this is this and this is that, all kinds of information that then I was able to work with, because otherwise I might not have seen it. So I believe that the concern people have around the world for the fact that justice doesn't seem to have ever come in this case. I think it's an amazing job they've done bringing the truth, if you want to call it that, the truth of something's not right, to light, but to actually put to bed the case, to force anybody, to force one of these departments into, quote, doing the right thing or to admitting whatever. In my experience, no, probably not. It's very, very rare that this can be done. I've worked quite a few cases where I've seen them closed wrongly. I have gone to the media, and by the way, you know, for all these years, I was in the media. You know, I was in the media every single day talking about crime. I was at CNN, MSNBC, Fox, Discovery, you know, NBC, ABC. I was there. And when I had a case in South Carolina, I mentioned this to you last night. I had a case in South Carolina. It was a quadruple homicide case in a motorcycle shop. I was brought down to South Carolina. I spent a week with the sheriff's department. I saw all the evidence, and I wrote up my analysis of the case and who I think did it, how it all went down, who did it, and so on and so forth. And they never pursued my suspect. They never went forward with anything. Then a number of years later, there was a man in the area who was caught with a woman he had stashed in a kind of trailer back behind his house, and a container, I think it was. And it turned out he had killed her boyfriend, kept her in captivity, and then killed another couple. He was a serial killer, really creepy dude, creepy dude. His name was Todd Kolop, and down in South Carolina. And so what happened was, the day after they caught him, the sheriff suddenly appears going, and you're not going to believe, you know, God has shined upon us and has shined upon me. I'm now able, after like 13 years, to close the Superbike case. We've never been able to figure out who did it. Todd Kolop has confessed to the quadruple murders in the motorcycle shop. And I'm like, say what? You know, I'm like, what? So anyway, it goes on. After he eventually they do a plea bargain with him. So anyway, he ends up getting out of a death penalty on the 3 murders he committed, because he was willing to accept and confess to the Superbike murders. He does a confession, and after he does a confession, the police actually say to the media, and to the victims' families, that Todd Kolop had said something that only the killer and the police knew, and that was all 4 of the victims were shot in the forehead. And so everybody's like, oh, that proves it. See, Todd Kolop did it. Okay. I worked on that case. I have all the autopsy reports. Not one of the victims was shot in the forehead. It's an absolute outright lie. But it convinced the entire public, and the media went along with it. Now, you would think, since I worked on the case and I was part of the media, I could go to the media, and I did, with all my evidence, including the autopsy reports, and say, look, they're lying. Todd Kolop completely lied, and the police backed this lie. And I can also, I've written up a whole thing on it on my website about the details of the case. And I've also proven that his entire confession had so many holes in it. He didn't know how the thing went down. He didn't know what was shot first and what was shot second, who was this and who was that. He didn't know who was in the motorcycle shop. He didn't know anything. The guy completely fabricated up a story that I think that might have been helped by somebody. And I could prove all of this. I went to the media with the information, and not one media outlet would touch it because they already had the deal with the sheriff's department and with the whole police system and the prosecutorial system down there. They were satisfied with it. Put the case to rest. Everybody's happy, and that's the end of it. And to this day, not one media outlet has ever contacted me over that information or will let me speak on it. So this is an example of what can happen. And I believe the same thing is true with the Madeleine McCann case, that it doesn't matter. The evidence is out there. And, you and many, many others, Gonzalo, myself, have put evidence out there, all the information. Here it is. And is it looked at properly? Is it really taken seriously by the people who should, or are they all just pushing that aside and saying, "Oh, we're going to ignore that, and we're going to go with the story that we like, which is it's a she was kidnapped, abducted, and that's the way it is." And can we force any change on that? I mean, it's been years and it hasn't happened yet. So my stronger belief is the only way the truth might come out in this case is someday somebody does confess. Somebody, finally says, I've had it. Here's what really happened. And, maybe that'll happen. And I think there
was one thing I was pointing to last week with an article that involved the lawyers of the T7. And they were stating that they wanted to give details. They wanted to change their stories, but they weren't allowed to. Because it was the lawyer's quotes, I absolutely believe it. And I found it quite interesting.
Wait a minute. You think if there's
okay. You're gonna here we go. Okay, Pat, tell me.
Hey, people put quotes around stuff I said I never said. Or they took a statement I said and they cut it in half. This is one of the difficulties that it's very hard to make judgments. So if you said, what do I think of that? I have no comment because, quite frankly, I don't really know if it's accurate. It could be, but I just don't know. And unless I absolutely know, I don't know if it's more fabricated nonsense. Whatever side you're on, lots of stuff has been, put out there that isn't necessarily true.
I get it. Now, but the thing is, and this is another thing I think which we don't have the same thoughts on, is I've got a more positive outlook on things.
Somebody
as you know, and not only because I believe in what I believe, but also because I don't want to go to a place where I feel that this is all for nothing. I really want to stay with what we're doing, and I do believe. And I don't know. I know your thoughts on Operation Grange, but I'm not so sure on your thoughts on the Portuguese police. Now, I really believe that the Portuguese police really know everything, and it's just a matter of time. Now, do you have similar thoughts to me on that, or are you going to change it for me?
Well, no. I absolutely believe Operation Grange is a political, just a political shenanigan. I've believed that since the very first day when they came out and said there was a remit to look at this as an abduction. It was over for me in that 1 minute. I'm like, okay, it's going to be a waste of time. This is all some kind of smoke and mirrors thing. And I wrote a thing right away on that. And I think, we talk about how, isn't it nice that the two of us, we don't always agree on everything, but we can still like each other and not just throw each other to the wolves, because we can still have, it's good to still, discuss things because it brings up ideas in one's head and it makes you,
Oh, absolutely. And
I want to be sometimes because it makes me think some more, and I want to see what somebody else is thinking because, you never know. This is one of the funny things that will happen. Somebody will say something and you're like, Yeah, they're a kook, or they're like, what do they think they know about this? And then like 3 years later, you get some information comes in, and you go, ooh, I kind of remember what that person said. It might make sense now.
Well, it's
So,
it's an absolute thing for me is to listen to you, and even though we don't have the same thoughts, it's really interesting. And I tell you what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to check and think in my mind about the Smith case, the Smith sighting, and also like yourself, I love to be second guessed, and that's why a lot of people have thought me odd because I connect with pro McCanns, as we all know, and the interesting thing that I like to do that is because they do make me second guess things, and I have learned a lot because sometimes when things aren't on the our side, they are not being said. But when you're talking to a pro McCann and they come up with something, and we all know that, I've often for years chatted with Pam Gurney. I mean, she's the biggest pro McCann that known. She's not. Anyway, so, and I get along with Pam, may I say, is that I remember one instance in particular, and when I was doing my videos, I was very careful to make sure that I got the facts straight from the files. I didn't know at the time that the dogs had alerted to the blood at 15 out of 19 of Madeline's markers. But it wasn't until a pro McCann brought it up to me that there was actually 32 different markers and allows. So that changed it. It wasn't 15 out of 19 that were Madeline's. It was 15 of Madeline's 19 markers out of 32, which totally changed it. I always remember that one thing, and I still have a video that has the original in, which is incorrect. But that's the thing. Like you're saying, it's important to hear other sides, and that's why I love having you on, because we've got such different things, and I'm sitting here just loving what you're saying.
What's interesting, and why it's nice when people can have a dialogue. I think that's the word I was looking for before. Dialogue. One of the things we've lost in the world today is the ability to have a dialogue with people who don't agree with us 100%. It's like, oh, well, you're one of them, politically or whatever side of a case you might believe in, or whatever it is, you're one of them, and therefore nothing you say has any value. And that's really, really sad, because in my experience, each one of us has such we have such a different set of information that we come with, whether it be from a cultural perspective, or that comes from a professional perspective, or it comes from some just some experiences you've had, that things that other people may not know. And I certainly know I don't know every culture in the world. I don't know every lay of the land. I don't know everything about everything. And I may be missing pieces of things that might make me change what I think if I heard those things. And that's why, for me, when I worked on cases, I've often listened to, I'm willing to talk to the community and say, what do you think? I actually bring people into something. What do you think? Because, for example, when I was in South Carolina, I don't live in South Carolina. I don't even know what goes on in that town. I have no clue what's going on in that town, how people behave, what they think. I just don't know. And so by talking to people and learning from people there, it might influence what I'm looking at the particular case. So there's nothing wrong with opening up your mind to listen to other people and take what they have to say and value it. So I think that's really important. And I want to go back to what you asked about Portugal. I think Scotland Yard, I just don't think that's going to happen. It is a Portuguese case also. I think this whole thing in Germany is nonsense. I think that's going to be something that's just a ploy to put the case to bed not for Portugal, but for the rest of the people. As far as Portugal goes, yes, I think they having been involved the way they have been involved, I believe they probably have a pretty good idea what happened. But again, the difficulty is they have to prove it. And this case has had so many problems with the politics involved and with the distance and with the countries and all of this, this is what I believe is the only way they're going to suddenly go in and anybody's going to be taken to court. It's going to have to be extreme proof. And same thing with Brueckner. It'd have to be extreme proof, not a bunch of people saying stuff and a bunch of theories and some real, circumstantial evidence that could be something else. It would have to be big. And obviously the number one would be to find Madeline herself. I, of course, do believe she's dead. So therefore, I would say to find her body. And like one of the things I have gone on for years about, which nobody's taken me up on, is when I went to Praia de Luz and I analyzed where she could be, where would a person move her body, a person who's not overly familiar with the area, a person who has only so much time, a person who thinks the way he thinks. If it were to be Jerry McCann who moved her body, if it were to be him, where would she end up? And the place I found that was the most likely was a location just west of Praia de Luz, very close by. It was on a road that Jerry's phone pinged on. And as you're going down the road, you suddenly take a right and you go into this kind of like dirt area, goes into this kind of desolate area, and it's got some windmills up there and it's empty land. And you could go up there and put a body up there. And the place is called, I have to pronounce this. I'm going to look down here so I can pronounce it right. I'm not going to pronounce it right. Monte do Jose Mestre.
Just wonderful. Great pronunciation.
Now, here's the thing. I don't know who owns that land or what that land is. I have mentioned that over and over again. Would I love a team to go up there and, with dogs and metal detectors and everything else and, whatever equipment they have and try to see if she's buried somewhere up there? Absolutely. But here's the reality of how things usually work. Sometimes, like, for example, when let's say a woman goes missing from her home and they can't find her anyplace, you know who ends up usually finding her? Is a dog walker or a jogger. They trip over her. They're going along, all of a sudden, oh my God, this body down a ravine and my dog went barking that way. That's how they find it, by accident. So let's say, for example, this desolate area of land is up there, and for some reason it's sold off to build houses. And then come the, bulldozers and stuff, and they're bulldozing the crap out of the place. And all of a sudden they bulldoze up. Oh, look, it's a bag. There's something in it. Now, if that happened, and they found a bag that happened to have Maddie's body in it, her remains, that would be great evidence. And then, of course, you still have to connect who put that child there. Now, of course, it turns out to be Jerry's bag. That kind of helps out.
Oh, wow. The blue bag. The blue bag.
But they would need something like that or an absolute confession. And that's what they'd have to have, one of those two things. And in Brueckner's case, if it were truly him, they came up, if he had her clothing and he had photos of him assaulting her, hidden in a safe place. Yes, that could be evidence to take somebody to court. But all the circumstantial evidence in the world right now is not going to work in a courtroom of law, because a defense attorney, especially since Scotland Yard said it wasn't the McCanns and it was an abduction, a defense attorney could go in there and have a field day just tearing up the prosecution to say, how could it be the McCanns? Even Scotland Yard said it's not them and it's an abduction. So the prosecution is not going to go forth with something that can just be torn apart and made into a huge circus. It's not going to happen. So it's going to have to be something very substantial in the way of forensics, or a solid confession. I mean, if Jerry or Kate decided to confess one day, well, yeah, that would.
Oh, wow. Don't think that's going to happen. But okay, I have a phone call. I mean, that always happens, doesn't it? I don't know why they call me on a Saturday afternoon.
I saw a question come across and I wanted to answer for that person. The question that I saw coming across the screen was, do you think the McCanns knew Christian Brueckner and that he helped them? And here's my thing. Analyzing the McCanns, if their child died of an accident in their vacation flat and they had to deal with it, Jerry is not the kind of person that wants to bring in half the world. He would be the kind of person he would take care of things his way himself. Now, I'm not saying one of the friends couldn't know something, because they just would know it anyway. but I do not see this as some kind of thing where he's going to hook up with sexual predator someplace and plot something with them. It just, that gets too fanciful and would be a good movie. But no, I mean, he would do something that he's going to take care of himself. And the least, you don't want to let that many people know if you can avoid letting that many people go. But you do what you have to do, but you don't try to make it worse. And somebody just wrote too, they're clever people know how to destroy possible evidence. They're regular people. They're not brilliant people. The McCanns are regular people. They're not criminal masterminds. Here's what happens in a lot of cases which people don't understand. Why do sometimes people get away with things? Why sometimes does the case never get closed? I have to tell families this all the time. They're like, I don't understand it. Why? And I'm like, look, some cases have no evidence. This is absolutely true. And there's no evidence for certain reasons. Either it was such a simple thing that there was no evidence. There was a case where a girl, she left work. She was standing outside of her work at 9:00 at night, and then she disappeared, and her body was found the next day. And the question is, only clue we had is she left. She had a drink with her in a bag, and those were sitting on the sidewalk. Other than that, nobody saw anything. There was no evidence at the scene because she just disappeared, right? And I said, well, to me, the big piece of evidence is that the things are set nicely on the curb. So I wonder whether she didn't sit down in somebody's car to chat with them, that somebody she knew, and then they took off with her. And that's why her stuff is still there. But there was no evidence. Witnesses pointing and saying, I saw that, or the guy, dropped something on the car, or there was a video camera there, which that's the best thing we have today is video cameras. They solve so many cases today. But sometimes there's just very little evidence. Not in Maddie's case in the sense that somebody actually breaks into your place, there's going to be evidence. But there are times when you have things like, somebody sets a fire in the place that they're burglarizing or raping somebody, and then but the fire department shows up and they use their hoses and then things disappear. The knife goes from one room to another. Sometimes people steal stuff. At the scene, people steal evidence. Sometimes it's something out in a nature area, and just over time, animals take away things in their teeth. Some kind of animal comes along and picks up whatever it is that's laying on the ground and carries it off, or the rains for day after day after day and destroys the evidence. Sometimes there's just not enough physical evidence to put a case to bed, and sometimes people who aren't so bright just get lucky, that nobody saw them, or just get lucky that they got away with something, or they guessed right. They're not, most I say, when in these situations, you don't have criminal masterminds. That's not what happens. And like with serial killers, the reason that movies always portray serial killers as so brilliant has nothing to do with most of them are brilliant. They're not brilliant. Usually what they do is they simply target somebody when there's no witnesses around and nobody knows who they are because it's a stranger homicide. And you have the whole community, and I don't know who did it. And a regular crime would be a boyfriend kills his girlfriend, a drug deal goes bad, something like that. And everyone, you go to the place and you say, hey, John just got killed here. Do you know who did it? Yeah, it was Joe over there. I saw him running away with a knife saying, that son of a bitch is dead. You have to make sure you handle the case properly, but it's not that hard to figure out. But for stranger homicides, they're very difficult. And occasionally when you have a situation where we have Jean Bonnet's situation, we have the Ohio case of baby Lisa, we have the Maddie McCann case. There's quite a few cases where it is believed that family is involved and they're still out on the street. So it is very possible that, when nobody's around and it's night, you can get away with things. You don't have to be a mastermind. But on the other hand, there is evidence in this case. So let's not say there's no evidence. There's no evidence in an abduction in this case. But there is evidence in this case, a lot of it.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you that you mentioned earlier, Pat, and that was about when you were over in Praia de Luz. Mm-hmm. You mentioned about where you think there could have been something happening. Was that in the Triangle area? Where was close to that? Where you mentioned, I'm sorry, yeah. I don't know the name you were saying, but what was it close to Villa de Bispo? Was it close to Sagres?
No, it's just west of Praia de Luz. It's not even far out of town. It's I can't quite remember. It's the map is really weird. And it's been a long time since I've been there. I think it's maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes outside of town, west on the main highway.
Okay.
So it's not far away. So that's, one of the things that people also don't understand is when you put a body in your car and you're trying to get rid of it, every minute that body is in your car, you're sweating bullets because you are freaked. I mean, you can, people are just looking, oh, I assume I can just drive for 5 hours, and they're paranoid that something's going to go wrong. And you're going to get stopped. Something's going to go wrong. People are going to find you with a body in your car. So you are freaked, and you want to take care of it as quickly as you can. And you will do what's easiest, and you'll go maybe to a place which you're aware of that you don't think you'll be seen. And so that's what you do. And sometimes people don't get away with it. They are caught unloading bodies. I mean, it happens. And in this particular case, apparently whoever had Maddie in their vehicle found a way to put her someplace where she hasn't been found, and they weren't seen doing it. So there you go.
It's so hard to believe. I just have to address Roberta Armour there. Does Pat?
I just saw that too. Yes, we know we have a disagreement on this one. Yeah. So does Pat?
And of course, as we both know, there are different thoughts on. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. Here's something I've always noted in cases that go on and on and on forever. The majority of cases, again, as I say, aren't criminal masterminds, and millions of brilliant things don't happen. There isn't massive amounts of people involved in cover-ups and clever scenarios going on. It's not the way things work in real life. It makes a good movie, and if you're going to write a book, you're going to do that because you got to put 200 pages together, and you can't have it be that simple, be finished in 15. So what you do is you have, you look for, could have happened, and that could have happened, and then you build this huge scenario. So the theory that Maddie died earlier in the week, and again, we have to even look at why she died earlier in the week. And there's so many theories about why she died earlier in the week. From she had the same accident, but it happened 3 days earlier, to she was, somebody was sexually assaulting her and she was killed, or I don't know. There's lots of different theories about something that could have happened to her. And then the concept is that even though she was dead earlier in the week, this group of people, whoever they are, all got together and kept hidden the fact that she was dead by substituting children for her that people wouldn't recognize, and taking pictures that, or whatever, fudging things, and these all kinds of machinations that are going on, to then have her go someplace else days later. I'm sorry, that's just not the way life works. There is no evidence that I can find from the crime scene itself and from the behaviors of the McCanns and their friends that says that Maddie didn't die in that, or as I believe, died that night in the flat on that exact time that has been looked at as the time. And the behaviors, the panic behaviors, and the strange things that happen, and all the confusion and all that stuff, and the stories that don't match. If people had time, they make better stories. No, I believe it was something that happened, and it was dealt with then. I just do not believe in a very, very fanciful, long-winded. Everybody's involved in doing all these things, carrying around children and faking things, and somebody else started walking around with her when the Smiths saw. Somebody walking, they decided, somebody else, not Jerry, would carry a child that wasn't Madeline. This is not the way people work. This is stuff of stories. It doesn't work this way. And there's no evidence that any of those things happen. So what happens is it becomes in my opinion, a kind of a scenario, a fictional scenario that is created as an interesting scenario. And again, it would make a great book or a great movie. But I don't see any evidence, and I stick with evidence. So until somebody shows me evidence that points to that all these things could have happened. And people say, well, it could have happened. Well, yeah, lots of things could happen. Doesn't mean they happened. It just could happen. And, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. And maybe it's true. Something happened 3 days ago and all these things happened. I do not see the evidence of that in any way, shape, or form. To me, all the evidence points to something happened the very night that they, were with their friends. I think the children were left alone. I think Maddie came into an accident while they were left alone, and then they had to deal with it. And I understand the motivation makes sense then too, why they had to deal with it, because it was, If you come back and you find your child dead, and if you indeed did give that child medication that she shouldn't have had, and you left her unattended and neglected, which leaving a child who's not even 4 years old with her little twin brother and sister, you are leaving them. That's neglect. That's absolute 100% child neglect. And I will say that straight up. That's the only crime I can accuse the McCanns of, because that is absolutely proven. That's child neglect. And if something happens when you neglect a child, you are liable for that. And if you come back and find your child dead, you know that you are in a heap load of trouble. You know that not along with losing your child, you're probably going to lose those other 2 children, and you might end up in prison. And everything goes to hell. And so you think in that moment, it's too late to save Madeline, but I can save the 2 children, and I can save us. I can save myself and my wife if that's what happened. And people do stuff in that panic to save what they can save. I'm not saying it's right, but it's what they do because they want to save what's left. And then they deal with their emotions later, justifying, whether it was our fault or it wasn't our fault. They can go to a priest, they can do whatever, they can do confessions, whatever they need to do to live with the truth. But once you start the lie, once you start a cover-up, the problem is you have to keep the cover-up going, because you cannot let down on that, and it becomes quite a difficult thing to have to put to deal with that as many years as they would have to deal with it if that's what happened.
Well, the thing that I absolutely love about having you on here, apart from having you on here, which is so great, and you know what, you were supposed to be doing a Fox interview, and that changed, and you chose us, and I'm so happy. Thank you so much. We're second best to Fox. but
this is quite frankly quite a lot of fun. So and I haven't talked about Maddie in absolute ages, because generally speaking, there's not much to say. But it's a fun thing to kind of look back and see where we are now, and where we can head with this. And and I'm glad there's people like you out there to go someplace with it. I mean, I'll always be around if stuff comes up, and I find it very interesting. I will always comment on that. I just don't pursue it like I did in the beginning, because when I went to Pride Deluge and wrote the book, my point in writing the book, which was I forgot the name of my book.
The disappearance of Madeline again. Yeah.
Okay, so when I wrote that book, I said I was waiting. One of the things I really wanted to know, what was happening, as much information as I could get. But I had not been to Pride Deluge until after I wrote the book, and it was just because of circumstances. But I waited till Kate wrote her book so I could get it from the donkey's mouth, and then I had that information that wasn't just from everybody else, but from her. And then I wrote my book based on the evidence that I was aware of and what Kate wrote in her book. And that's when I wrote my book and put it out there. And the reason I wanted that book out there was because outside of Gonzalo, I hadn't seen anybody focus on the evidence and not make a big fictionalized story out of it and make it, cool things and all that stuff, but just focus on the evidence. It's not a long book because I didn't care to write a 20 chapter book which described, the politics of the UK and the politics of Portugal and what the mountains look like. I wasn't trying to write that kind of book. I just wanted to write my profile in a form that people could understand, so that out there would be a second person, because Gonzalo really out there on his own. He wasn't getting a lot of support from the professional community, and because professionals were afraid to speak up, because when you do, you kind of get like an axe in the back of your head. So it's frightening to speak up as a professional with the Madeline McCann case, especially when you have Carter Ruck waiting in the wings to attack you.
Oh, golly. Yeah.
So I felt, like some other professional, and I had to believe in what I believed in, because I wouldn't have just written it for the sake of somebody, you just want notoriety. I'm like, yeah, really not this kind. But I really wanted this information to go out about the case. So I wrote the book so that people have all the basics and can look at the evidence and why I think, what I think the evidence supported. So there'd be one other voice out there besides Gonzalo, backing up, a professional voice backing up that there was no evidence of an abduction, and here's things that are more likely. Later on, I had the opportunity to go to Portugal and meet Gonzalo and also see the actual location to look at where, where a body could be buried around there and removed to, and what it looked like going from point A to point B. And I did learn a lot of really interesting things by being on the site. And I wish I had had that before I wrote the book, but that life is like that.
Where can
But
people get
blog.
your book?
Yeah. The book, you certainly can't get it at Amazon.
Well,
they put it,
yeah, I think that we've made that clear.
yeah. And people wonder, why Amazon pulled the book. And here is really why. And people said, are you really, really angry at Amazon? I said, actually, I know why Amazon did it. All my other books outside of Only the Truth, and by the way, if you want a really good fiction book, read Only the Truth. It's one of my favorite books that I wrote, and it's a sweet fiction book, and I published that myself on Amazon. But most of my other books are through publishers. So what happens is when you write a book through a publisher, they vet the book. They get their lawyers on it, and they go through the whole thing, and they say, okay, we're going to publish this, and we've gone through it, and we're comfortable with it. And at that point, if it had gone into if my book had gone to Amazon through a traditional publisher, Amazon would have left it there because the McCanns would have had to sue the publisher, and the publisher's lawyers would take it on. But when you self-pub, and the reason I had to self-pub the book is because no publisher would touch the book on Madeline McCann. They're not crazy, So I self-published it, put it on Amazon, and when the McCanns brought Carter Ruck into it and threatened Amazon, they were going to sue Amazon. Amazon's like, look, we're not making a shitload of money off this book. So, it's a $2.99 book. It's not like we're making tons of cash here. So we're not going to waste our going have a huge lawsuit with Carter Ruck. So they just pulled it, right? And people did ask me, was I worried that Carter Ruck, they would come after me personally? And I said, I absolutely, one of the things I strongly believed was they would never come after me because I lived in the United States and not in the UK. So I'm under a different legal system. And secondly, I will put the McCanns on the stand and I will be doing the questioning. So I don't think they want that. It's not going to go well. So I felt pretty confident I'd never end up in a court of law in this. And I was correct about that. So people can now, you can't get it from Amazon, obviously. You can get it, Smashwords, one of my favorite places, Smashwords has it. And also Barnes & Noble does have it online, which they didn't go up to Barnes & Noble, just Amazon. And I don't know if it's someplace else. It might be, but I really don't know. But Smashwords is where I usually send people. And then once you read the book, the other thing to do is you go to my blog, The Daily Profiler, and read the blog posts I put up after I went to Portugal, and I'll put all the new information that continues on from the book that I learned from being in Portugal. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. So you can just read that for free. And if you're too cheap to buy the book, just go straight to the blog.
Well, that would be great. There's been a couple of questions come up, okay. And I'm really pleased, as I mentioned before, that we have differing views. And one of them is about Maddie not being seen or anything of Emily, I think, had put it, not being seen, and that, could something have happened earlier? Again, this is important to me. We do this every week, and everybody hears my views, and I just love the fact that you have totally different views, and that gives the viewers an opportunity to see another side, and that's important to me. I don't want anybody to blindly believe me, and well, they can believe you because you're a profiler and you know what you're talking about, but it's so important to me. It really is, that everybody gets to have different ideas, views. So when it comes to something happening earlier, I think Emily had put up a question about her not being seen during that week. Do you have any thoughts on that, or have you? That's more my end, I think.
There's a lot of questions about that not being seen thing. A lot of questions about the crash and was she signed in? Somebody else was signed in for. There's a lot of questions about the photos, and it goes in a direction I just I don't want to rehash every single detail of that. But here's a very good important point about that. If they had time, in other words, remember the night that everything went down, right? This is the night when the police were called, and all hell is breaking loose, right? People are running around, things are confusing, all kinds of stuff is happening. They have to come up with, they have this huge monstrous story about, the doors being left open, and so it's checks and all that whole scenario is so stupid that you wouldn't come up with it if you had time to come up with it. So
I've heard that thought.
If your child went missing like 3 days ago, and you had a little bit of time to deal with things, it's much simpler to do the simple thing, which is say something to this extent. We went for a walk, we went for a drive, we stopped at a place, and we turned around and she was gone. Okay, she was gone. We looked around. We ran around in the bushes looking for her, and we couldn't find her. And then you call the police because she's nowhere in the area, right? They're not in your apartment checking out your shit. They're just going to be in some park someplace where she vanished. And since nothing, and of course you're going to not be in the place you dumped her off, mind you. You're going to put her someplace, like rent a car, drive, put her in that place I'm talking about, and then drive around and pretend she went missing somewhere else. Or just pretend we're in town, turned around, and she went missing where there's no camera. You were just there and she just went missing in the crowd. Do that. I mean, don't try to create a massive scenario about I came in and the wind went like this.
Oh,
and the door was slightly ajar, and I looked in at her sweet little face. I mean, this is such a, if it wasn't really what they were trying to cover up, this would be like the most ridiculous, huge, massive, confusing, messed up scenario ever. So they would do something much simpler the way you would handle it if you had time to do something. They didn't have time. They were in a panic, and there was no way out of it. They were in such a short time frame. They only could do what they could do to try to cover up and claim this and claim that. So no, I don't believe she went missing early in the week, and they waited 3 days and then came up with the dumbest scenario in the world. No.
Okay, I get it, and that's why I'm happy to know that other people hear your thoughts on this. And you're very similar to Gonzalo, as you say. There's slight differences in your thoughts, but basically that's what Gonzalo comes up with.
The only thought that we have different is we're trying to figure out what happened to her body after the fact, and we're talking about, because that is confusing, is to try to figure out at what point did. If the McCanns were involved, at what point was her body, where was her body put, when was it moved, and how was it done? That is, it's a difficult thing. He has a slightly different viewpoint than I do on that, but neither one of us has proof, mind you. You see, this is where most of us have a theory, and theories are fine. And this is why I say I don't mind everybody's theory, because, I worked on cases and everything's a theory till you prove otherwise. So, when I get into the South Carolina case, I mentioned that now, but just because it's got so many interesting things that kind of, you can see how things can be proven. There was a last customer in that case at the shop before everybody was supposedly killed. And he left the shop in a truck pulling a motorcycle. And he went by a particular convenience store that had a camera, and the camera was a certain time. Now, the question was, did he shoot all the people? In other words, he was the last customer, but did he leave just before they got killed, or did he shoot them all and then leave, right? Now, we had the moment that one of the last man who died was making a phone call to his wife and died while he was making the phone call. And he was laying in the parking lot. He had just been shot, and he's laying there. And so we had the exact time he made the phone call. It didn't go through, but he made the phone call. So we know when he died, and we know when the guy left the shop, and we know when he went past this thing. Now, there was a theory that he could be involved. The problem was nobody ever tried to figure out whether the theory could be proven to be true or not. So what I did was I had rented a sports car, and what I did was I sat at the entrance to that parking, the motorcycle shop where the road was coming by, and I had to see if I could make it from point A to that convenience store in a specific amount of time. And what I would do is I'd wait for all the cars to go by until I had the most road I could possibly have. And when I saw finally somebody coming down the road, I'd pull out in front of them, hit the gas, and speed like hell all the way down this country road like this. and hope I didn't get tickets. And then tell the sheriff, hey, I was doing a case thing for you, So even though I did that like 10 times at 90 miles an hour, don't give me 10 tickets. So anyway, so I'm riding down the road like that. I never could make it from point A to point B. And I was going as fast as I could go in a sports car, not a truck pulling a motorcycle in the back. The guy couldn't have made it. Now here's the interesting thing on that. So once you do that, you can disprove the theory that he was involved in the crime because he couldn't have done it. Now, there was one little wrench thrown in there because this is what happens when cases aren't handled properly. I asked the one most important question then. Is the time on the camera at the convenience store, the video, is it accurate? Did you examine it to make sure it was the accurate time? What do you think that answer was?
Well, I'm guessing.
No. So now we didn't know that the time was accurate. So now I don't think he probably, if the time was accurate, he didn't do it. But since you didn't check the actual validity of the actual timestamp, well, I don't know. So you see, that's how you can have a theory, and then you have to go about trying to see whether the theory can be proven or disproven. And you don't have to try to prove or disprove. You just try to gather the information that would end up being one or the other. And so you say, well, sometimes I've done stuff where when I've gone to say, well, could this have happened? And then I'm like I had one case where the guy parked a vehicle, and I thought maybe the killer parked the vehicle in this lot and then went through to his house on the other side of this little green park, right? Well, it wasn't really a green park when I got to the green park. It was this huge pit with a bunch of briar bushes in it. And about 40 minutes later, when I couldn't get myself out of the briar bushes, I said, I don't think he came through here. I think I've proven it can't be done, So theories are like that. So, you can come up with all the theories in the world. I can't prove, as far as Madeline's body, where I think it was to begin with, which I think is in the Roca Negra. That's the cliff right next to the water. There's these crevices, and you can walk right down the beach, go up into the crevice. You can put a body down and cover it all up with the rocks and dirt. And you can come back later with a vehicle and park right next to that spot, walk up there, take you 5 minutes, take her back out and take her someplace else to possibly the place I think she could have a final resting place. It's a great theory. Can I prove that theory? No, I have no idea if it's true. I absolutely have no idea. What I would like to see is there's any evidence. Was there any evidence at one place or the other? But at this point, there is no evidence to support that theory. That's just a theory. And Gonzalo has an interesting theory as well. And he also has, at this point, no evidence to support that particular theory. Now, there are pieces of evidence to support other theories, but just not those. And so those are up in the air. And it's like, interesting. Do I know that happened? No, I don't. But you have to go do more investigation.
There was one comment earlier, and it caught my eye because having a friend over in not in Praia de Luz, but close by in Portugal, they'd mentioned to me at that time that there was something strange about one of the lakes there. I can't remember the exact pronunciation. Somebody put it up as a comment earlier. Barajum, but are you familiar with Bravado or something? There's a lake there called that. Right. And then, funnily enough, something else happened later, a few years later. And it seemed as though there might have been something with that lake that I actually put a picture of it in a video, just as a flash picture, just as if the McCann saw it and it had something to do with it, I just put it in the video with no reference to it. So are you aware of any of the lakes of a name similar to that? Maybe, I think it was Jose, was it? Put the comment up earlier. Maybe if you could, Bravura.
But what's the point of the lake? I don't understand what the connection is.
Well, there was issues where it wasn't searched, and there was issues that it could have had something to do with it. Okay, if you're not familiar with it, then that's fine.
Nobody searched Monte do Jose Mestre area. Nobody searched that either, and and that was it's a theory put forth by, and I detailed it out by a criminal profiler. Nobody's been there either. The fact is, there's a lot of places out there. there's lakes everywhere. There's desolate places. There's all kinds of possibilities. And the only thing you can do is take the look at the movements of the McCanns and say, well, here's some interesting movements. And for me, the whole, I always have to look down again because Monte do Jose Mestre, and I think I'm still pronouncing it wrong. The reason I picked that was because in the time frames I saw with the hire car, with his phone pings, that was a great possibility to choose that location. And if I were an investigator myself, if I were involved in the investigation, that might be a place based on my calculations that this is a reasonable choice. I might send a team up there to investigate. But there may be other theories about, well, they could have gone this way. Maybe this happened. Maybe that happened. There's been so many theories about where her body could be.
What about Huelva? Have you considered Huelva?
Yeah, I looked at. I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Absolutely no. I personally think that this was a job done by Jerry. If Jerry were involved and something happened to Madeline, the parents are covering up, I believe Jerry would have taken care of the situation himself without his wife.
So you see nothing odd about the visits to Huelva and Fatima and with John Corner taking videos and disappearing for, okay.
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not a possibility. Again, it's not my top theory. And this is the cool thing about an investigative team. Because if you're an investigative team and I'm going to go, hey, I'm going to put this one out there. Here's my support for where I think. And they go, that's really interesting. Okay. Joe, what do you think? Well, I think that Huelva thing. And we'll have what we call a discussion, as opposed to just fighting each other and saying, oh, your idea is stupid. No, I go, okay, there's some valid points you make there about Huelva. Okay, let's check that out too, because I don't know. So we would have our viewpoints. Personally, I can't remember. I looked at Huelva a long time ago, and I know I came to a conclusion that it wasn't my particular number one choice or number two choice. I don't know why. I can't. It's been so long. I honestly cannot remember why. But I just didn't. I thought it was too far, too complicated. Again, I think it makes much more sense that if you're moving a body, you want to be able to do it in such a way that you don't have to involve people. And to take the hire car, drive that spot I said, the parking place next to the beach, at an hour where nobody's going to see you because you know where it is. You just slip in there. Takes you less than 5-10 minutes where nobody's around. Put the bag in the trunk of the car, possibly on ice. Whatever you're going to do, and then by yourself, just drive out of town 10 minutes, go into a desolate location, do what you got to do and get back. I just think it's much more likely than trying to involve a daytime trip with you got a body with you and your wife with you and all this other stuff going on. That's my personal opinion from the way I see people handle things. It's usually they like to do it in a very sneaky, quiet way, and they don't go for big shows.
Okay, now Jan Sabin has put a comment there. And there's actually quite a few comments, which would be great if you could answer. Pat, do the majority of people hide bodies near the event, that is within a 5-mile radius or something?
Absolutely, Jan. That's absolutely correct. That's actually true. And normally what happens, there are cases when it's not true. But normally what happens is, again, you don't like having the body in your car. You're freaked out. The body is in your car. And every minute on that road, the body is in my car. It's just creepy and scary. You think you're going to be caught. So the tendency is whatever place well is where you will dump the body, because you're not going to go to a place you do not know. I have no familiarity with, that you don't know what's going to happen there. Like, let's say you say, okay, I'm just going to drive down this, I'm going to drive 10 miles away, 15 miles away. I'm going to drive down this road. And you drive down that road, pull off, and as you're putting the body there, there's 2 teenagers sitting there with beer, and you're like, what the hell? Or there's some farmer out on his land saying, he's up milking the cows, and there you are dumping a body on his land because you didn't know it was a farmland. You didn't know he milked at 5 o'clock in the morning. You tend to pick something you are pretty damn sure, and probably have checked out, by the way, that nobody's going to see you do this. And usually it is close to where you are, someplace you familiarized yourself with or have always been familiar with. So yes, that's why I picked that place. I picked it. It's very close to Praia de Luz. It's very possible Jerry could have driven around prior, if he's involved. He could have driven around looking for something, and that's a close place. Because again, how many places are you going to drive into? Looking and looking and looking. And I actually did go quite a ways down that road. And man, every time you turn in, there's another building. You're like, ah, crap, can't dump a body here. And then you drive over, oh, can't dump a body here. And you're like, God, is there any place around? But this place is close. And I drove in and said, holy crap, this is right here. And it's totally desolate. The whole time I was up there wasn't another car that came up there. Totally desolate. So it was a great location, and it was very close by. So yes, people want to get the body from point A to point B in as short a period of time as they can, and they want to put that body someplace where they're pretty darn sure nobody's going to see them, or if they see them in the area, they're not going to be suspicious too. I mean, you don't want to go into an area where you're going to stand out. People are going to say, what's that guy doing here? You're completely not matching the area for whatever reasons.
And Roberta Alma, where do you think she was kept until she was taken and buried?
I don't know. I know there's some beliefs that she was, kept in a refrigerator and all this stuff. Where I personally don't go with that. I personally believe, I still believe the Roja Negra, because I believe she had to be. I think she might have been moved twice. Right there. I said there are crevices. Literally, there's crevices. I'm gonna try to see it. So put it on the screen here. There are crevices that just come down. You can walk up into the crevices. Just go walk up from the beach into the crevices, and you can put a body up there very easily and cover it up. And as I said, if you can park right next to it. In a parking place, it's pretty empty. It's just like a couple spaces and there's nobody around there. You just pull in, you could go right back up, pull the body out and put it right where you put it back someplace and hide it. That's where I think it was more likely to be temporary. And, remember when Kate went on about, Madeline lying on a slab out there?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think she knew exactly where Madeline was. And I think she was accurately describing where she was at that point in time. And then I think it's after that she was then moved, because they may not have ever considered moving her if they put her there. And I'm saying if, because I'm trying to keep myself from being sued. If they were involved, and if they decided, okay, we had to put her someplace quick, close by, because we have to do something with her body. If we put her in this cliff area and just hide her in the scrubble there, maybe, if they do find her, they'll think a stranger put her there. Like a predator put her there, right? A predator grabbed her, raped her, and then hit her on the cliffside. They won't necessarily associate it with us. Maybe that's their original thought. Then when, some people start saying certain things, you think, oh my God, maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe we should move her to a place where they'll never find her. There's no way they're going to find her. Maybe it's worth taking that risk and just taking, an hour in the morning one day, pulling up there early morning, grabbing that bag and with her body in it and moving her to someplace close by where I can make more sure that nobody would ever find her. Again, this is at this point just theory. This is looking at people's behaviors, what's in the area. When I was in Praia de Luz, because I could walk down the beach, I could walk up the Roja Negra, I could get in my car and I could drive around the area and see where we were at. Actually, it wasn't my car, but I had help with Peter. So we drove around, and by seeing everything and knowing how close everything is and how what would work and what wouldn't, I developed. This is my number one theory on that. But again, I don't have evidence of that because I'm not conducting an investigation. And so I wasn't able to go and actually have a team and go in there and figure out all these details and have weeks and weeks and weeks to work on it. Because, for example, the location where the car would have been pulled in, where I believe up next to the Roja Negra, looked like a place to me where you could do that very easily, very quickly, and no one would be the wiser, right? Now, maybe I would need to hang around there for like days on end, just surveying that one spot to make sure that I wasn't crazy about that. I didn't have that opportunity to do that. So, I had another case where a woman she came out of a bar and her car was found on the side of the road, and her body was later found in an inner city lot. And the number one suspect in this case was this white guy who had been a chatty tow truck driver. And he was a psychopath. He was a police wannabe, and they thought he did it. And what I did was I went to that lot and I sat there in that lot. I wanted to see whether the lot was an empty lot where I could just pull up and just dump her and drive away. Turned out when I pulled in that lot, there were like 30 people there. There were homeless people there. There were drug dealers there. And because I happened to be white and that happened to be a black area town, this is not a racial thing. It's just that I didn't look the same as most of the people in that area. And I can tell you, I was being stared at. People kept looking at me going, why is she sitting in the car over there? What's she doing? And I sat there, must spend like 2 hours before I thought I even had a moment to dump a body. So I'm thinking, this chatty tow truck driver is probably not going to go there. And I said, I think the guy who went there to dump her body had to be somebody who could blend in. And indeed, they did arrest another fellow I forgot how many months later, but he happened to be black, and he had another body in the back of his car. And he knew the area. You know, that was the area he knew. And he knew if he pulled up, nobody would pay a bit of attention to him because he blended in. So over there at the Rojo Negro with that parking spaces or some of the other details, you have to spend time analyzing the situation to determine whether, just because I think that is a good concept, but I'm only there one day and I'm only looking at it in one period of time, perhaps I need to check out other times and maybe other days and see what the other possibilities are, and whether I'm like, oh, that seemed like such a good idea, but boy, when I checked that out, that didn't work out. So that's what an investigative team is supposed to do, is go into those things and really analyze them and determine whether things are possible or not possible. And, you know, and right now, I just don't think some things have been checked out, but I think a lot of things haven't been checked out. So I don't know. So I don't know, you know, I always hope that, you know, regardless of where she might be, where the body of Madeline might be, that one day she will show up, you know, and maybe accidental, you know, it could be fishermen if she's in a lake. It could be, I say, bulldozers on the property I kind of like as a possibility. Who knows? You know, it could be somebody buys a farm and she's in a well on that farm, you know, and nobody ever found her for whatever reasons. So there's a million possibilities, but you know, you investigate. If you're doing a true investigation, you investigate as many as you can do. But you know, maybe you missed the one you shouldn't have missed, or maybe you went there, investigated it, and decided it wasn't the place, and it really was the place. You know, for whatever reasons, or you dug it all up and you missed the one spot. You know, that happens a lot. You know, they look at a whole piece of land and they just happen to miss the one ditch that the person's in. You know,
Well, and the dream is actually when Jerry was in Washington, I think in July 23rd or something, and that's when Kate phoned up their liaison officer, I've forgotten his name, and claimed that she dreamt that Madeline was on a hill. And that's at that point, that's when they decided to bring in the dogs. She was basically claiming that Madeline was dead.
Right.
Which Jerry later denied, of course.
Right. I think, you know, and this is one of the interesting points about why I think this is one good piece of evidence that supports the fact that A, the McCanns may well be involved, and B, that Madeline is dead. And this, you know, Jerry was out of town and Kate did not have support right there with her. And she was alone with her thoughts. And, you know, no matter what the reasons are for what happened, or, you know, it's your child and you still have feelings. And if you did leave her and with some medicine and she came to an accident, the guilt will eat you up. I mean, it's going to eat you up no matter whether you're trying to save your butt and your own family, and your kids, or whatever, your careers, whatever you're trying to save. It doesn't mean you don't have massive guilt at the same time, unless you're totally psychopathic and can completely erase that, which I think, you know, personality disorders, I'm not going to get into who I think has a personality disorder and may be able to do that. But I think that Kate, you know, if the McCanns were involved, may well have reached that point where without support, she couldn't stand it anymore and was giving away. She was hinting as to where Madeline was. It's like, I'm done, just find her. You know, and whether if they found her, whether they could prove that anything, you know, that wasn't a child abductor who threw the child out there, whether she would claim, I just got lucky when I said that it was an abductor who still took her. You know, could see her. It was just a psychic thing. She might have still, not had to be involved with how the child got there, but I think she might have wanted it to end. Just fed up with it and wanted it to be over. Yeah.
And being on her own, along with the fact that Jerry came out of the court and denied it. He denied that she had a dream.
Right.
I think that tells us a lot too.
Oh, the massive amount, the behaviors of the McCanns are, remember Jerry's blog? One of the most bizarre things I've ever read.
Oh, do we remember Jerry's blog?
Yeah, I remember, it's gone now, but I mean, the Jerry's blog was fascinating. I'm like, who writes this stuff after their child goes missing and is supposedly out there being, out there somewhere, somebody's raping and and torturing your child, and you're writing this blog. And a lot of their behaviors from the very beginning were indications that they did not believe Madeline was alive. Because one of the things that tortures people whose children they do really believe their child is in the hands of a predator is, even though most child predators do kill their victim within a couple hours, and so rarely do they actually keep them, the parent doesn't know this. And all they can do, I can't even imagine how you deal with this. I think about, my children, and if somebody had one of my children, and I think of them in somebody's basement or in the back of somebody's van, and they're being abused and tortured at every single moment of my life. That's all I can think about. If my kid is being tortured and she's calling mommy, mommy, and I'm going to go jogging. Oh, yeah. It's just, there are so many behaviors that just said, it's already over, and we cannot help her, and therefore we might as well go on and do these things because we cannot help her and she's not suffering. And I think there were so many behaviors of the McCanns like that. I mean, like dozens and dozens of those behaviors, which again, one can always say, well, they're unique people. They have unusual personalities. People always try to say that. They're individuals. But I can tell you, having worked with families of missing children, there is a lot of, 99% similarities in certain behaviors, and the McCanns did not exhibit those.
And not only the behaviors, which leads me into just letting everybody know that we have Peter Hyatt coming on, I'm not sure if it's going to be next week, and he's doing statement analysis. And I think
really good.
I'm really looking forward to that too.
Oh, he's going to be great because statement analysis is one of my absolutely favorite things in the world. Because when you actually put things on paper or you go on air and you say specific things, I do a lot of when I'm analyzing a case, there's things that come out in the statements which are just and I'm like, well, the guy just admitted he did it, and maybe the investigating case says, what? I'm like, you didn't notice this? The guy admitted he did it right here. Or the statements he's making don't match reality. Or he's saying this and when he really should be saying that. The statement analysis is fabulous. And Peter Hyatt is absolutely one of the best experts in that field. I've followed a lot of his work. I've seen him analyze stuff, and I really just what he says. So, because I've seen people do certain statements, things, maybe people I don't have as much faith in. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You got what out of what? No, but I don't get that with him. He's really, really good. And he's great. People should definitely listen in on that because he's fabulous.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm really actually excited about particularly excited about having you on. I mean, I couldn't believe yesterday that Fox changed, so you were able to join us this quick. I mean, that
one person is dumping is another for
I wasn't able to put together everything I wanted to, but I've just last night chatting with you was just amazing. So if I can get
you were my date for Friday night, you like coronavirus date.
I know.
You were great company.
It's great. It's really great. So looking forward to Peter next week. Absolutely. And but I mean, there's still so much more that you know about the case that I want you to pass on to our viewers that I can't tell them. I've mentioned so many times, I focused on the timeline, so I can I can access my what I've retained in my brain about the timelines, and I know the basics of the case, but people like you know so much more than me, and that's
And
what's so
I've
important.
forgotten more than I'm used to know because it's been so many years. It's true. If I don't review and review and review, I really can't remember either. But I will, so yeah, I'm pretty blurry on a lot of things. If I don't go back and reread every one of my notes, which I have to admit I just didn't do at the moment. But one of the other big keys to this case has always been something that I thought stood out, which is the issue of the locking of the doors. That when I went to Praia de Luz, that really stood out to me. Oh, two things. The street and the locking of the doors. Okay, so the claim is, now of course if that story changed, you remember first it was we locked the doors and then the story was we left something open, right?
Yeah. Otherwise an abductor couldn't get in. Yeah.
You're right, exactly. That helped him out a lot now when we decided we had to leave a door open. But here's the thing. You're leaving 3 children unattended, and your concern is not that they're going to hurt themselves, clearly, because for whatever reasons they thought they were good, the kids were going to be fine, right? They weren't worried about the children being left alone. Okay, so the only worry they really would have had is what? That you wouldn't want somebody to come in and do something to your kids or take your kids, right? You want to provide for their safety from strangers, not from the situation. So knowing that they're safe because you did whatever you did to ensure their cooperation, like sleeping. So you read them their stories, you maybe gave them a little medication, maybe, and they were supposed to sleep, right? And they would be asleep, and you wouldn't worry about them because they're asleep. And all you have to worry about is making sure that nobody could access the location they were sleeping in, because who would want that? They're right on a corner, mind you. They're not like in an isolated location. They're on a corner. So if you're going to leave there to go have your drinks for, let's say, whatever you decide you're going to pretend you did, 30 minutes, and then one of you is going to come back and just peek in, right? You would lock your doors. So one thing you would do is lock your doors because you're in a strange country and on a street where somebody could access your front door or your back door with ease. So since you would lock the doors. That's simple. Now, let's say you decide, oh, well, we opened up the back because it was too far around to get to the front door every time we wanted to check. Absolute nonsense. So when I walked from the club back up the street, and there was where I would go in to the back, go into the sliding doors, or I would walk around the corner and go in the front door. I mean, the difference between those two was about 3 seconds. I mean, I could turn and open the doors and go in, or I could just go around the corner, open the front door and walk in. Now, I'm sorry, but if it's a 3-second difference, I'll take 3 extra seconds to make sure my kids are locked in. So it made no sense.
I've heard so much said about how small it is there in comparison to what our perception is.
Correct. So when Jerry first originally said the place was locked, I believe him absolutely it was. But when they realized, oh, that's a problem, because I said, hey, they made up this story quickly. Oh my God, how would somebody get in there then? They had to say they had a separate key and they had to go through that window. But if we left the door, maybe that, I believe it was locked. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is the street, the one that Jane came up, in everybody's mind who hasn't been there, and in my mind before I went there, I'm thinking, Jerry and Jazz are outside having a chit chat, right? Jane comes up the street, and let's say these dudes are like, I'm going to try to do this on the screen here. Can you see that? I can't do my hands right. So you have 2 of them, where are they? 2 of them talking, these guys, right? Having a chat. I can't do this on the screen. So anyway, on the other side is Jane, and she's way over here, right? Way far away from them. So she's coming up the street. She might see them over there. But since they're in their conversation, she could walk right by and they would have, not paying attention to her. They wouldn't see her, right? Because they're so involved. And they're over there. And then she would see this guy crossing the street, and they again would be in their conversation and may never see him. And they wouldn't hear her coming either. It's a big street. No, it isn't. None of that is true. I walked up that street. And first of all, when you come up there at night, it's dead quiet. You can hear your footsteps, clunk, thump, 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 because it's dead quiet. And the street is so narrow. You practically run into people walking up that street. There's no way in God's earth she walked by Jerry and Jez standing there chit-chatting, and they didn't see her, neither one of them. And she walked by them and didn't say, hi, guys. That's impossible. And from where they're standing, if one is standing one way and one is standing the other like this, one of them is going to see that guy crossing the street. One of them is going to see Jane. Absolutely no way that that occurred, because that street is extraordinarily narrow and extraordinarily quiet. And it's also extraordinarily short. We're not talking a very long walk between the two locations. So it's a story that if you aren't there, you go, oh, okay. But if you're there, and that's why it's really important for investigators or profilers, if you have the opportunity to go to that exact location to see what it's really like, and not what it is like in your mind or what it's like in a photo, because photos are deceptive. You know how you have a house and they take these photos of the house, and you're like, oh, look at that huge living room. And you get there and like your living room is like teeny weeny, you know, like, well, they use a wide angle lens or something, you know, it looks different in a photo. So there's no way, I believe, that anybody could walk up that street past two people and nobody saw each other, and the other guy's there too. I absolutely do not believe that. So that
And
was
this
one.
This is what I really love about you, is that you have actually, and you went there with a little band of assistants, and it didn't cost anything. It didn't cost the taxpayers. It didn't cost anything, but you wanted to be there and actually do the right thing and understand the whole place and what was there. That was so important. And I mean, I really admire you. You do this for a lot of cases, and you don't get money for it. I mean, a lot of what you do is pro bono.
I have done pro bono for many, many years. I have actually, to tell you the truth, I've stopped doing pro bono. And it's not because I didn't get paid or that I mind working for no money. That's never been an issue. But what I found that happened in the majority of cases I worked was that a profiler coming in to work at the police department years later can solve the case, but it will never go to court, because the reason the case has gone south is because something was missed, something wasn't done, it wasn't analyzed properly. And a profiler coming in and then saying, oh, this is what really happened and this is your suspect. Usually the evidence is gone by then and they can't pursue it. And the last thing they're going to say is, oh, God, she solved the case, but, you know, we messed that up years ago. You know, sorry, we can't do anything with it. So basically they would just say, I couldn't help them. And I you know, because they think it's, you know, political suicide to do otherwise. So now what I'm doing, because I've determined that the first 48 that we talk about is truly the most important part of police work. It's the first 48. And the majority of cases, they're not unsolvable cases or super difficult. You just have to do a lot of work to get all the information. But there are those weird cases that are harder, and if they're looked at incorrectly in the beginning, or certain evidence is overlooked in the first 48, by the time you get around to maybe 2 or 3 years later saying, oh, you know, we should look at this, you're in trouble, because that killer has had time to crush his vehicle, get rid of every one of his clothing, get rid of any blood evidence, you know, whatever. He's had years to get rid of crap. All your witnesses are dead. You know, nobody remembers anything. So it's too late to get a good case together. So I am now working I'm developing a profiling program, a detective profiling program for detectives. And my purpose is to bring criminal profiling back to the detectives where it belongs, because in reality, a detective is a profiler. I do nothing different than basically a detective would do. I analyze the evidence. The problem a lot of detectives have is they're working so many cases because of the overload of homicides in their district that they have very little time to think. They're working on no sleep. They're trying to get all this. They have so many details they got to attend to that a lot of times the time to sit down and analyze these cases in depth is not there. And a lot of times there's training isn't there either. So they haven't had the training to analyze these cases and determine things from them. So I'm working to develop a methodology that is focused and able to put things in order in a relatively quick manner, so that important stuff isn't overlooked and things aren't guessed at. A lot of time people guess at things without supporting it with evidence. Oh, I think this could have happened. No, it didn't. You're guessing that. You have no evidence that happened. Look at the evidence and then determine what happened. Don't guess. And so I've decided that my time is best spent developing the program to then train detectives so they can do their own, just to assist them in a methodology that will help them in their work, because they truly are the ones that are on the front lines. They're handling the cases and they're doing all the work. And I'd rather see them have this a bit additional training that might make the difference in quite a number of unusual cases, especially that would help them get solved and not lead them into be just cold cases.
Well, the thing is, as you were saying, a lot of the detectives that are looking at these cases and investigating actually don't have the full training that we would have expected them to have.
Yeah, it's kind of a hidden secret. In police work, essentially what happens is most of the time you go to police academy, to become a police officer, and police academy you learn the basics of what the laws that you need to know. You learn training techniques as far as handling suspects, so you don't hurt them, so you can contain things, how you handle crowds, how you do all these different things about handling the issues of the case and the public. And most of the time it's not about the case, it's the public, because most police officers, they're not doing casework. They're doing patrol work, and they're arriving on scenes, and they're doing a number of different things, but they're not actually handling the actual investigation of a case. So what happens is you go and you become a patrol officer, and you're out there for years, and then one day somebody decides, there's a space open in whatever it is, robbery, or a space open in a sex squad, or in homicide, or whatever. You have to work your way up. You don't just jump to homicide. But, they see a space open, and they pick somebody that they think has been an exemplary officer. Maybe they think they've done pretty good analysis on whatever else they have actually dealt with. They like their work style. Maybe they're good drinking buddies. Sometimes it's just because you get along well, and you join that squad. And there is no detective school that you go to. You join the squad and you sort of learn on the fly there. You learn along with the other officers. You learn from them on the job training, essentially. Actual training is pretty rare, that you actually say, you're going to become a detective. Now we're going to send you to detective school for 6 months. No, you usually go from patrol officer to detective. That's the way it works. And so by the time, if you go into homicide, you may never have studied evidence. You may never have studied blood spatter pattern. You haven't studied the forensic pathology about what happens to a body, what you're looking at when you get there and the person's dead. What about guns? What about gunshot, issues? You haven't studied all that. You haven't studied psychology of killers and what they do. You haven't studied any of that. You have a lot of knowledge from working with criminals for years, so that does help. And of course, you have seen things. So those pieces, the more you've seen, the better it is. But, when you run into certain cases that are unusual and you haven't had this kind of training, you just sort of like wing it, and you guess and you wing it. And some of the detectives that I have worked with, they've been great guys. But I have gone in and they're like, they'll say, this is what we think happened. And I remember one case, a guy's like, I think this is what happened. And I'm kind of just looking at him going, you're a detective? You've got no logic whatsoever, because the number one thing you need is logic. If you're going to analyze a case, you have to have logic. Yeah. And some people just don't have logic. They're really good at following the rules and doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and all these things in a row. They're good at that, but they may not have any logic for some kind of in-depth kind of investigative analysis type thing. So that's just kind of an innate skill, I think, in people. And then a person who has that skill, then they can be trained really, really well. But I'm trying to come up with something that's just useful to the detectives, because I know they may not get this kind of stuff. And they sometimes go to seminars. If they're lucky, finally they get to go to a seminar on blood spatter pattern. They get to go to a seminar on this and a seminar on that. And that's fantastic if your department's going to send you there. And some detectives are very proactive, and they will go and I ran a profiling course with a college for a couple of years, and I had 5 courses in profiling and forensic pathology and psychology, all to do with serial homicide and all this stuff. And I had detectives in my class, and I had people becoming detectives in my class. So they were studying on their own because they wanted to learn more. And they can pick up books and tons of books and study. So there are detectives out there who do a tremendous amount of work to educate themselves and to learn all that they need to learn. But, some of them are working 70 hours a week and working cases around the clock where they haven't slept for 2 days. And how much time they have to put out, studying when they're overwhelmed with homicide cases, it gets rough. So
how are you providing them with some of the information?
well, the information I provided prior was through a college course I developed, the first profiling program in this country, which is now is defunct, I believe, because the college and I came to a disagreement over the quality of the coursework, and they wanted to diminish the quality of my coursework, so they kind of let me go, shall we say, and then they ruined my program, and now I don't think it's there anymore. I think they finally dumped it. I worked so hard on it, it really makes me mad. But anyway, but with this new program, my idea is to have a very specific methodology that they can follow, because a lot of times what happens is you, instead of going analyzing things in a logical sense, there's just a lot of jumping around, and things are missed because one is jumping around. So if one should be saying, well, if A happened, then B must have happened. And if A didn't happen, then B couldn't happen. It's basic logic. If anybody's ever studied logic, it's that kind of thing. So if A happened, then B couldn't have happened. And a lot of times I've seen that logic.
How do you study logic?
Huh? What?
How can you study logic?
No, logic. No. There's brilliant courses in logic, and they used to teach logic in high schools.
Oh, really?
Which I wish they'd bring back. Oh my God, yes, because there's specific methods of logic which follow a pattern, and so it's simple things like if a person said they kicked the door in, A, the door was kicked in, therefore B. What is B? There should be damage to the door. And what have happened in some of these cases, like I had a case, that's exactly what the guy said he did. Busted the door down. And I said to them, did you ever look to see if anything was busted on the door? And the lock was intact. There wasn't any damage to anything. There wasn't even a scuff mark. I'm like, how do you break the door down and absolutely have nothing? So, if A happened, then B should have been there, but B was not there. So maybe he didn't break the door down, he's lying. So that there you have that information. So there's it's a little more complicated than that, but I want to set up a methodology where they can do it that way. They can actually write down something and know what should go in the other things, and be sure that if I wrote something in column A, I should have an answer in column B, and not ignore column B. And a lot of times, sometimes things are just not looked at. And then you look later on, you go, why didn't you? Remember I just saying about the guy going from point A to point B with a vehicle. The question is, if there's not enough time for him to get from point A to point B, then he is not the killer. If there is enough time, he could be the killer. It's that kind of logic. But then the question comes down, if the question is, can he or can he not get from point A to point B, and that's going to determine if he's the killer, why did nobody see if he could make it from point A to point B? Why did nobody try to run that route the way I did with a vehicle? Nobody had done it. They just never checked it out. And I'm like, how could you not check this out? So there's ways to do things.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And we're getting so many questions for you, Pat. Kelly Hopter,
Right.
What's your thoughts on the twins possibly coming forward, Pat? If they've overheard arguments, etc., over the years and know their parents are involved, is it normal for kids to keep quiet?
I don't personally believe that the parents were involved, that the kids would have a clue. That's my personal opinion, because first of all, at the time they were very small, and they were also very sleepy, really sleepy. Wake up! And they're not waking up. So, which is why we believe they might have been medicated, right? But anyway, they were not aware of what happened that night. Okay, and they were very young. I can't remember anything that happened yesterday, so why I would remember something when I was 2 is unlike. So you have kids, and what happens at that point is, who are the people that plant ideas in those children's heads on a day-to-day basis for the next 10, 15 years? It's mom and dad. Now, mom and dad just have to present as a team the fact that, Maddie was kidnapped, she was abducted, and we've been looking for our Maddie, your sister, all these years, and we love her. And that is what they're going to present. And you're growing up with that on a daily basis. And when you look out at the world, all they have to tell their children is, you see how many people believe in us. You see how many people are sensible and know we never would hurt Maddie. There's legions of people, and all the people in the media, they all know we didn't do anything. It was just that bad Detective Gonzalo in Portugal who made everybody think differently. And then there was those crazy people on the internet, and that fake fraudulent profiler lady. And they're putting bad ideas into people's heads and lying about us. And of course, if you're those children, first of all, you want to believe your parents are telling the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what, Pat? I want them to believe it. I want them to believe their parents.
Right. And you have to understand that even if we have a certain attitude toward the McCanns, it doesn't mean that on a daily basis they're bad to those children. So those children, they could still be loving those children, playing with the children, giving them nice presents, taking them on vacations, making sure they get educated, doing all the things a good parent will do with those children.
Absolutely, yeah.
A lesson about things you shouldn't do with children. And now they're doing them. So, they're not necessarily bad parents to those two children. So those children, they lived under a cloud, but it doesn't mean that they would think their parents were involved. I really... they might have their suspicions when they get older and just say, well, we kind of think, maybe when they're 25 or 30, you might go, I kind of look back on that and I kind of think,
okay, yeah, when they're older, I mean, that's different when they're older.
I don't want to go there anyway. I'd rather not go there. So unless what happens along the way is, how kids will suddenly, they'll grow up and then they'll turn on their parents and suddenly they'll do an expose or a movie and like, my mother and my father did these horrible things to me. And, so you never know whether somebody could turn on somebody just because they want to, but that's still not proof. Yeah.
I hope that they believe their parents and they are content with their lives. I mean, this is not about them. And that's the only issue I have, that anything that I do or anybody does is detrimental to them. They need to be protected, and I'm hoping they are. Now, again, another question from Emily. Do you believe that the T7 knew what was happening, what it was all about?
That's really tricky. I believe someone in that group may know something.
Okay, that was very quick.
It's hard to make total determinations on that. But do I believe that somebody might know something? Yes. And some things which are just, I think the things that stand out the most would be like Jane Tanner, because she supposedly saw some guy running, taking away what looked like a child that could be Madeline. And when she found out Madeline was missing, she didn't race over and go, oh my God, I saw the guy running down the street with her. And of course, the McCanns forgave her for not bringing that information forward. And that, again, two types of behaviors that are completely unbelievable. Because if I saw a man walking away with a kid, and just a little later, I find out that my friend's kid was missing, you don't think that's the first thing I'd be telling them? And you don't think if I were that mother and found out my friend didn't let me know about that, so I could have raced after my daughter and saved her, I wouldn't be friends with that person anymore. I'd be done. I would be absolutely done. Done. I mean, you didn't tell me. Done. That would be a normal reaction. And yet we have this, oh, well, it's okay. What? So I've always thought Jane Tanner's story was a pack of lies. Again, what happened on the street didn't make sense. I think she made that story up. And you have to ask why she made the story up unless somebody asked her to make the story up.
Yeah. So. I think Gonzalo, in one of his Praia de Luz, I think the video about his return to Praia de Luz, he said that because they all came in through the back entrances, that it made her story hollow, in their opinion. So I think we can push aside. We can push aside little Eggman with no face, which increased every time it was reported, and it finally became a real man that didn't exist. But I would like to address RP, who her comment is, yet DNA Oh my goodness.
Reanalysis.
Reanalysis could help crack the case. What do you think about this, Pat?
DNA
I can get the words right in the end. Reanalysis.
DNA reanalysis we have what we've had analysis, and they've gotten whatever they've gotten from that analysis. I don't know what's left to get from another analysis, what techniques could be used that would benefit, who would be doing these tests.
Well,
if there were anything that could be done, of course, I'd say absolutely it'd be worth doing, but I don't know what that's going to prove at this point. I don't know what they're going to get that hasn't been gotten. And so I'm not really sure what we're talking about.
I think what she may be referring to is in the Maddie podcast with Mark Sonokonoko, he had Dr. Perlin.
You can say Mark's name. I'm going to give it to you. I can't say Mark's name.
Oh, listen, I mean, we should ask Shirley, because she's been practicing for months and she still can't get it.
I'm just gonna jump in here. I can't for the life of me. I said it right once when I wasn't thinking, and after that, I can't say it. So I don't want to insult him. So I just call him Mark.
Mark.
I just won't. Yeah, I just won't. So
I have to say, as I was writing about him or messaging him, it always came out as Mark Soul Noko. No, I can't remember what it was, but I practiced. Once I heard him on an interview, I think with Sonia Pilton.
Is that right?
Pardon? It's Soul Noko. Oh, I thought it was Soul Noko. I can't remember. But he's
one of the KOs out of it, Noko. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. But anyway, he contacted Mark Perlin.
Wait a minute, I want to let you know that, my maiden name is a really long German name. It's too many syllables and has too many N's in it. And I got married to a Brown. And when we got divorced, and I was already professionally Pat Brown, somebody said, "Oh, you're going back to your maiden name?" I'm like, "Are you out of your mind?" Nobody's going to be able to say that on TV. They need to say profile or Pat Brown. Then I have the profile. No, I love Brown. Really easy. So.
Well, it certainly is, and I have to say, Pat, I've seen so many comments that are so happy that you came on here, our little channel, and you're here. I mean, I am so happy. I really am. I am so privileged. I'm so happy. I'm so excited that you came on. So thank you so much.
Well, Lizzie, what I said about the media, I don't do very many media things, that I don't trust the people I do anything with. They call me, "I'm going to do my show." I'm like, "No." You're one of the few people I've trusted forever, and because I've seen you're honorable. You've always been honorable, and I say even if we disagree on certain things, you present information, but you're still honorable about the way you present information and the way you present opinion. You're honorable, and then you're also respectful, and that's another thing that's missing from the media these days. Because you can go on and "Hi there, Pat Brown, and we want to tell you that we think you're an idiot." So, thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, jeez.
It's that's why I came on, because I've always liked you, and I think you do a good job, and I'm really glad you're out there, because I do believe I don't have the energy to do what you do, to keep that information out there, and to keep exploring and all this, and I'm glad to see that somebody is doing that, because and that's why I appreciate Mark as well, and other people who have kept things going. I don't have to agree with all of the things that they're presenting or that they're pursuing, but I think the case, I think it's nice that it's still out there, and the case is alive, even if Maddie isn't.
I am doing these Saturday lives for one reason. I wasn't going to do them. I really had decided no, and there was somebody special, Chris and Kim, and I was inspired, and that's why I'm doing it. So I'm here for them, because of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, now we go. So
yeah, it's special to me, and I'm really happy. And you know what? Do you know what I'm really happy about is that now the channel used to be great. We used to get when it was going, I mean, we've got 15 million views, and it was really going well. Then it went dormant for a little while. And I started doing some lives with Maureen Cook, who I still appreciate the fact that I was able to do them on Saturdays, and then we took it to this channel, back to us, and it's remained, pretty static. But in the last few weeks, we've really started to improve. And what I'm really excited about is not about our channel or me or anything like that. It's the algorithms getting out there, because the whole reason for me doing this is to get the information to the UK public who believe the media, because that's all they see. Portugal and other places here are able to hear Gonzalo's documentary and things like that. But Britain has been stopped, and I absolutely believe, I think you probably will, hopefully will agree with me, or maybe will agree with me, that I think the thing the McCanns fear the most is that UK learn the truth, because they really don't know a lot about the truth through the media. So this is why we're here. That's why you're here.
They don't in the United States either, because the media has shut down as well. That's why I went. First of all, they wouldn't publish my first book, right? Then Gonzalo and I talked about putting out a book together, and I actually put I put in the book with my agent, my literary agent, the proposal in, wrote a whole big proposal, and she couldn't sell it to anybody in the United States. And we thought it was a better chance here of selling in the United States, because we thought it wasn't the UK, but nobody would touch it. And every one of them came back and said, wow, this looks like a really interesting book, and we respect Gonzalo Amaral and Pat Brown. We think that's a great team as far as the professionalism goes and their expertise. We're not touching it. That's it. So all the stuff that's been done over the years, most of it in this country, for example, Nancy Grace. I was on Nancy Grace's show for I don't know, I can't remember now, 8 years, 10 years, I don't remember. But I was on her show at least 3 times a week. I was a regular on her show. So every day or every other day, there I was again, right? She knew that I had done this stuff with the Madeleine McCann case. And when new information, when new news came out, guess who wasn't invited on that day to talk about the Madeleine McCann case? Me.
Well, it's funny you say that, Pat. Yeah, because the day just prior to Gonzalo's documentary coming out, I contacted golly, what was her name? Amiel, her producer anyway. Okay. And I was showing last week some of her message to me, because I spoke to her on the phone for quite some time. She was so excited. She wanted to know links for this and links for that. I spent the weekend compiling as best I could everything that they could easily access. And then 15 minutes just before the documentary started on the Monday, I contacted her again, and 10 minutes later, she got back to me and she said, we're not interested.
There you go.
I was so shocked. I was so shocked. And I realized that although the producer was absolutely enthusiastic, no question. I mean, there was no question.
Took that information to the higher ups, the legal decisions, it's over. That's the way it
so was that because of you, Pat? All my effort that weekend was cancelled because of you?
It's their legal team. Their legal team decides that we're not going to go there. It's easier to tell the McCann side of the story and make it exciting, and everybody's all, oh, the poor child. I hope the family gets their child back. I mean, they have more of a heart for the story of the parents losing their child to a child predator than they do having somebody come out and saying the parents did it. So they don't want that. The legal team has decided it's not worth it. And the last time I think I did anything on American TV was, you mentioned Montel Williams. I think that was the only, maybe I did one more, but I don't remember. That was so far back at the very beginning. And Montel, it was a great show. And Montel was actually very interested in the theory that the parents were involved. And after that, nah. You know, nobody will touch it. And when the stuff comes up, they take my name and they go, whoosh, don't call her, you know, because she's going to talk about the evidence, and they don't want to talk about the evidence. So again, media has an agenda, and the agenda is to sell things, make people happy, and not get themselves in trouble if they can avoid it. As long as it's making so, yeah.
It's really sad. And Nancy could have made a difference with you. She could have made it.
There would have been a 5-minute segment anyway. So, but you know, still, it could have been something. So.
Yeah, it's. But you've done a great job over the years. I mean, you've been doing this for what, 18 years? I think you said.
Huh? What
was it? About 18 years you've been in the media as far as profiling goes?
In 2003. I've done probably over 3,000 media appearances. And then I stopped doing the media a number of years ago when I started having issues with their ethics. And the last show I did was CNN. I don't know if anybody saw that particular episode. It was pretty funny because they called me up and they said, we want you to talk about this I took a stand against mass murder. No, not mass murderers, talking about them. I believe that mass murderers, because we keep putting their names out in the media and telling their story and getting the next mass murder is going, cool, I can get my day in the sun too. And therefore I said we should not tell their names, we should not show their faces, and we should not tell their little backstory. Just say a psychopath killed a bunch of people today, it was horrible. And then talk about the victims and do not go into this guy because it's mass murderers do get a kick out of this, and it does inspire the next one. So I took a stand not to say his name and not to tell his story and not to have his face associated. And so when they called me up from CNN that day, they said, we want you to talk about, I forgot which guy it was and what story it was. But anyway, we want you to talk about it. And I said, look, I've already taken a stand. I've turned down, for 2 years, I've turned these jobs down. And I will not do the interview unless I just talk about mass murder in general. I'll talk about the psychology of mass murderers. I'll talk about what we need to do to stop mass murder. But I will not go on a segment and discuss this man, and I will not go on a segment that uses his name and shows his face. So the segment, she goes, okay. And I had it confirmed in an email that they weren't going to do those things. I went on the show, and the host starts talking, and she goes, so Pat, why do you think this guy did what he did? And I'm like, I made an agreement with CNN not to come on the show if we talked about this specific killer and used his name or showed his face. I gave my reason why I think this is causing an increase in mass murder. And she was like stunned, and she's like, but we can talk about what the FBI is doing on this case, can't we? I said, as I said, I made an agreement with CNN, and I stuck to my guns, and then I brought up the reasons that the media was responsible for the increase in mass murder because they keep giving the guy celebrity. And at the end of the show, the legal team must have said something. They come back and go, at the end of the show, they go, we kept to our agreement with Pat Brown, and we did not show the man's face or his name. And as he was saying that, the man's name was underneath the guy.
Oh my God.
And so it was hysterical. So that show, I got a thing, guest blows up on CNN, and it was funny. I got a lot of publicity out of that, and they're showing the name of the guy right under my face.
Oh my goodness. So you're saying that was the last time on CNN?
That was my last time on CNN. And then, and then, the problem I was having with other networks is that they would pre-interview me, and then they would bring me on. And this was a change. I didn't see this before. Then they would bring me on to a panel, and I was the punching bag for the 3 other people they brought on the panel. So, they have the 3 people that are all in agreement, and let's find somebody, and then they lie to you about why you're coming on. And so when you get on, you're like giving your opinion. Everybody's like, see, she's a moron. Look at the stupid thing she's saying. She's wrong. And you're like, why did you have me come on the show? You're just using me, right? To make fun of me. So I stopped doing those because I don't trust them anymore. And it didn't used to be like that, mind you. It got really, really bad. Documentaries have gone the same way. They have agendas and they lie to you about why they want you in the documentary, and then they use you and they edit you and they screw you over. And I'm like, I will still do a documentary, but I have to trust the company that's doing it ultimately know that they have they're going to make a truly great documentary. Like I want my Cleopatra, the information about Cleopatra that that I've learned over all my research. I would like a series on that, and I will work with a production company to put that series together because I'm working with them to produce an ethical piece of journalism, not that I show up and you got, oh, let's do a story on this. Let's decide that Ted Bundy didn't really kill all those women. So let's
That
bring the
is
profiler
amazing.
on, you know.
Pat, when you were telling me about Cleopatra, that was just absolutely amazing to me that you discovered, you actually went to Egypt, you went to the tombs. And sorry to go off topic, but I really think this is all part and parcel of how impressive Pat is, that she went to the actual to Egypt and the tombs and did discover herself. Well, you tell the story, Pat, not me.
Well, it's interesting if you actually look at the book and you see how the stars on my book, you see it isn't really super high. That's because I got a bunch of historians and Egyptologists people came in and attacked me for writing the book because I'm not an Egyptologist nor a historian. And they're like, how dare you tell the story of Cleopatra? You're a profiler. And I did a Discovery documentary called The Mysterious Death of Cleopatra. I think I did that in 2004. And I spent a month in Egypt with a Discovery Channel team. And then we saw in Thailand, England, and Italy doing the rest of the documentary. And in that documentary, I got rid of the snake because for 2,000 years, it's always been said that Cleopatra succumbed by bringing a cobra into the tomb with her and applying the cobra to herself, and then she died, and so did her two handmaidens because of this cobra. And this is a story it's been out there forever, and nobody's ever challenged it. And it's like, again, any modern case, and this was a 2,000-year-old case, but the issues are still the same. Instead of having a theory based on nothing, you go in and you go to the original part and you look at the actual evidence. And in the case of with the snake, the evidence, it was amazing. First of all, you have to find out whether a cobra can even kill 3 people in a row in such a short period of time. And the answer to that is no, it's not even, that's not how the venom of that snake works. Another question was, it was very kind of funny because she's in the tomb, which wasn't actually a tomb anyway, but the room she was in, they supposedly she killed herself with a snake, and nobody who finds her looks for the snake. I'm like, if Cobra's running around this room, I'm going to try to find a snake. And those rooms were hermetically sealed. There weren't any holes in those walls. So it's the way they build things in Egypt. It's hermetically sealed. So if you walk in there, that snake's still going to be in there. Nobody looks for it. So there were a massive amount of evidence that there was no snake involved in the death of Cleopatra. It is my belief, actually, that she was strangled to death, bar holdered, or where you want to, arm barred by whomever had her in captivity. She was kept in captivity by her nemesis Octavian. She was imprisoned by him, and I believe he dispatched her and dispatched the witnesses, which are 2 ladies. I don't think any snake was ever involved. I don't think she committed suicide. All the evidence points that she was killed after a period of being imprisoned. And so there's a massive amount of evidence in this whole story of Cleopatra, which people have never bothered to analyze the actual evidence. And that's what drove me nuts. It's like you tell the story over and over again, but you don't talk about the evidence. Same thing is true with Madeleine McCann. Oh, so, Madeleine McCann, the family went, they went on a lovely vacation in Portugal. And one night when they were enjoying themselves with their friends, their child disappeared from the room she was sleeping in. And somebody took her away. Okay, that's not evidence. That's a story you're telling. And if you're not going to look at the evidence, the story is you can tell that story over and over again and people can believe it, but it doesn't make it true. And so Cleopatra is a great example of this because the original story was told by Plutarch, who was the Dan Brown of his time. And he told a great story, but the truth wasn't necessarily in it. And so when I went to Egypt and was able to start analyzing every aspect of the story, every bit of the history, every bit of the things that happened or couldn't have happened the way they said they did. I studied naval warfare. I studied the building of ships. I studied the Nile inundations. I studied the building of temples and tombs. I studied the psychology, a whole bunch of this stuff. But I focused on understanding the evidence. What is the evidence in her whole history that I can now say, I believe this happened based on these 10 pieces of evidence, rather than just a great story. So, the same thing is true with Madeline. It's like there's a lot of people out in the world who've only heard about Madeline McCann as a story, and they do not know any evidence at all. They just know the story. And that's what the media likes to tell, because they don't want to bring up the evidence, because that might, make people think again.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted you to include about Cleopatra, because it just shows about you. And that's what I think is important for people to know. Is I know that you've been very controversial, and over the Madeline case, a lot of people have said things.
Yeah.
I want people to know that you actually check out evidence, you go to crime scenes, and you really, really look at everything. And it's really important. I mean, you are so credible in that. It's just amazing. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you're here. In fact, what is it now? We've I wanted to go through so much more, and we've had so many comments. And what I'd like to do, Pat, is maybe if I collect some of the comments and send them to you, whether or not you can come back and visit us again, and then you can answer some of those comments along with new ones, because everybody has loved having you here with us today. I mean, me mostly. I mean, I was so happy when I contacted you. I wasn't sure, but when Fox let you go, changed. I mean, what's the second best here? That's lovely.
I don't sell as many of them as my new books that I need to sell, but hey, it's like, it's
well, that's the other thing too, is what's important for everybody to know is, again, as I mentioned earlier, Pat's got a new book out, and it's called Black and White, and I will find it in a sec. And I'm not sure if Carrie has the link for that, but she may do. But also there's an interview that you had just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And we couldn't actually copy the interview, but it's you and your son did the book, and it's just so great. Obviously I haven't read it, Pat. I mean, I have to be honest. You've only just had it published. When did it actually come out?
It came out on February 2nd. It was an interesting. The whole thing was very interesting. Let me just tell you the reason it happened at all. And it is, it's obviously a political book, and there's a lot of people who are. The politics is very tough these days. I have a particular political opinion, and you can tell that from the name of the book. And there's some people that say, "Oh God, she's one of them." And I'm sorry, probably, but I still like you. I don't, whatever your political opinion is, I still love you. I think that we all explore things in life. We all have times when we believe this and believe that, and we all want the best for our countries, and we just have different ideas of how to get there, and we get sometimes very frustrated over those things. But the book actually came about. This is just a funny incident, which I think anybody could agree with, no matter whether they are conservative or liberal or who they voted for president of the United States. But what had happened was I used to run meetup groups. Everybody familiar with Meetup? Where Meetup is a group where it's on the internet, and you can say, "Oh, I want to go to a group in my area. I want to go to a book club." And you you find a book club, and you're having a ladies book club, and it meets on Thursdays at the library. And then you go there and you meet with them and you read books or whatever. They have walking groups, traveling groups. There's every kind of thing you can possibly imagine that is a meetup group. And they meet in real time. It's not, it's not on the internet. It's just you find the group on the meetup site and then you go to it. I used to run a couple groups myself. I ran a walking group on the internet. I ran a travel group, which I ended up using that to take women on trips around the world. I did 5.
Oh, that was great.
5 trips to Mexico, Nicaragua, Cuba, India, China, and Mongolia. I took groups. And that's how I met the women. Was I started in a meetup, and then the women would meet me. We go out for dinner and have an international night of dinner. And I discussed one of the trips I was going to do, and then that's how people came out. So this was going on, and what happened was I had a couple different groups, and never thought anything of what about the groups. And then I started getting all these advertisements, these emails coming in from meetups saying, oh, maybe you want to join this group, maybe you want to join that group. And what happened is the groups were African-American groups, like Sisters with Suitcases, African-American book club, sisters in, I don't know, sisters with such and such, and there were some groups that were right in my area, because I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is a predominantly Black area. I'm a minority in my area. And by the way, for anybody who doesn't know me, I have 2 biracial children and 1 Black son. So I was married to a Jamaican American guy for 25 years. So, this is a place I've lived for 35 years perfectly happily. And so these groups were in my area, and I wanted to join them because they were here near my house. And I couldn't, every time when it said I wanted to join, I was refused because I was white. They looked at my picture and said, you can't come. And I'm like, well, this is like illegal. This is like in violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I contacted Meetup and I said, hey, something's fishy about this. And they said, oh no, it's okay. A group can refuse you because of your race. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So there I am. I'm a cute one with my frizzy hair of the 80s. Yeah, and I look thin, so I like it. I said, is this, you really this is really allowable? And they said, oh yes. And, but if you need to have us help you find a white people group to go to, I'm like, I don't want to go to a white people group. I just want to go to a group that's near me and not 40 minutes across town. So I said, you're telling me that I can start a complete white people group? And they said, oh yes. I'm like, seriously, I can just see this. So just to test them, I started this group called White Women Yoga. And I took this group called Yoga for Black Girls, and I just changed out all the words to white, and I put this up on the internet, and all hell broke loose. So I got called a Nazi, and I got called a racist, and I got, how dare you do this? Don't you know brown people started yoga? And I'm like, well, yeah, I did, because I'm like in India right now in my sari with all my brown friends. But okay, it was just bizarre. And I ended up, Washington Post did a hit job on me. And then I did a Tucker Carlson show and explained the whole thing. I was trying to fight against what I consider a civil rights violation. And what I've seen in this country, and this is why my son and I wrote the book, is that I raised 2 biracial kids and a Black child through the 80s and 90s. And we were doing great. And racism was dwindling away. My kids were fine. We weren't having any problems. I just really wasn't worried about anything. And then I saw a huge change in the direction of the United States toward separation again. And this idea of racial identity groups and tribes. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And so my son and I were getting so frustrated with what we're seeing happening that we wrote a book together. And it was really cool because I actually didn't know my son could write. I was like, I know. And then I took the book out to my agent, and she hated it, and so she wouldn't take it to the publishers. So I went to my ex-agent, and she wouldn't take it to the publishers because clearly they were politically on a different wavelength. So I eventually went to a publisher on my own, and they loved the book, and it just came out. And it was a really interesting ride through writing this book with my son. But the thing we did the other day with Crossroads. Joshua was great. He was the guy interviewing us, and it's gotten a huge amount of viewers, and people really love what we had to say because we're just, they don't even. It's not even brought up that I'm a criminal profiler or a media person. That's not even in their interview. All they see is mom and son, and we just talk about just mom and son and the things we're dealing with on a regular basis, and what we see happening with the racial climate, that we're very unhappy because we don't want to see things turn into apartheid in the United States. We don't want to see the races pulled apart and people having to identify with one group or the other because, my son's like, what am I supposed to identify with, So it's just very, very frustrating to see it go that way. So we're trying to say, this is what we see. We see this happening. We start talking about how things were and what the things we started seeing occurring in the United States, and how we see the situation we've seen it getting to now, which is getting really disastrous. And it's such a shame. And so we talk a lot about the different issues, the political issues that are pushing a lot of this stuff, and people taking sides, and instead of being, not really being together. And and the people really like the book, and they really like what we had to say.
Yeah.
far it's been a really pleasant experience. I'm sure there'll be some who really hate the book, but yeah, so far everybody's really liked it. So
one of our favorite mods, Kerry, who is so great with the links. I think she may be passing the link on to everybody for them to watch that interview. And
it was a fun
I think, yeah.
and
So,
you get to see me rub my son's head because.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I was talking
that's
about
so
hair
great.
products, and he says, "I don't know about hair products." I'm like, "Oh, honey."
That's so great, because I think what's important and why I wanted to add that is because you as an overall person, I think, is important for people to understand. You're not just a Madeleine McCann profiler that people have found controversial. You have done so much. I've watched your doing some of your trips abroad and so much other stuff that I really wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. But before we go, and I think it's probably time, I usually only go for, I like to go for 2 hours, but I mean, we've had so many people interested. One last question that I know is important to everybody, and it's by Dear Maharaj, maybe. Do you think we'll ever know what really happened to Maddie?
Gina He. No, I don't know if that person speaks Hindi, but Gina He. No.
Oh, okay.
That's
So Pat, did I say it wrong? Whoopsie.
No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm just joking because I spend a lot of time in India. I go to India all the time, and
Okay.
I'm studying Hindi now, so I can go live in India for like 3 months out of the year. So anyway, will we know what happened to Maddie ever? I don't know. Sometimes what does happen is after time has gone on, and the main characters, shall we say, have either passed on, or whoever has been around that's going to be affected by the truth coming out is no longer an issue. Whether it be the participants or whether it be the police departments or whatever, the whole tone of the world has changed. It's possible. Thank you, Dio. Namaste. It's entirely possible that we could find out. I hope I'm around long enough. I mean, my mother lived to 93, so I got at least, a few decades, sort of almost, to maybe be here if the truth comes out. I say it could happen tomorrow. It could just simply be that somebody finally just says, "Oh, the heck with it. I can't keep this secret any longer. I'm going to just spill it." It's possible. It's possible that her body will just show up. Weird things happen every once in a while. You're just like, we never saw that coming. So it's possible that we'll get an absolute answer at some point when we get a confession or we get, say, the piece of physical evidence that we need. There is also the possibility that somebody will take these concepts to their grave, that people aren't ever going to say anything, and that the case will be pinned on a person who can argue it, like some like Christian Brueckner, and it'll just go down in history as he's the guy. And then like Cleopatra, who's had her entire history rewritten by somebody who didn't tell the truth, you get somebody who rewrites the history of Madeline McCann, and that becomes a popular book. And 30 years from now, 50 years from now, they say, well, Madeline McCann was kidnapped by Christian Brueckner, and that goes down forever. But I hope that we do see that at some point, especially all the efforts people have put out to get to the truth. I do hope that one day we all do know what happened. And it's important, in my opinion, also for the future of investigations. When you have investigations that aren't done properly, and I'm not talking about the Portuguese, I'm talking about when you have millions and millions and millions of dollars spent by a police agency, and they're coming up with nothing, and nothing makes any sense. This is not the way to run an investigation. It's not the way to get a level of confidence in law enforcement. And believe me, I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement because I know how hard law enforcement works. I have family in law enforcement, and they're amazing people. And occasionally things go south, and occasionally the training isn't there, and occasionally the politics gets in the way, and there's nothing that the police agency can do because politics is so out of hand. But it behooves us all to learn to know things that are true rather than believing a false story forever, because that will impact how we deal with the future and how we deal with future cases.
That is absolutely great. We're going to have to, well, we don't have to, but I think it's important to collate a lot of the questions, and maybe, just maybe, you may be able to join us again sometime, because I've seen so many people happy that you're here.
Aww.
And they love you, and it's yeah, I'm really, really happy. And what is important to me is to get these lives we have, and we do them every Saturday regardless, but how great if we started to get those algorithms up and started to get suggested on other videos. That would be great. So it's important to subscribe and to get those up. Not for me. I'm happy doing it, even if there were 10 of you. But to have Pat on is so great. And next week, maybe we'll be able to get Peter Hyatt on, who you love, Pat. And I want to thank Shirley for being here and passing all the messages for us. I know I missed a lot, and that's why I think I would love for Pat to come back and answer some of them. I mean, it's your knowledge, Pat, is just out of this world. And what you do is just amazing. And I just love the fact that our viewers can actually see a different point of view than mine, because I don't want them just blindly believing me. I want them to see all sides. And that's why, partly why you're here, partly because I like you.
And I say I really appreciate an open dialogue with a pleasant attitude. And I think this attitude that is here on the show, that we can respect each other. I wish people would take this into the world and be able to talk about other things and not have the anger and the hatred and all that stuff, and actually understand that, we all have different experiences. We come from different places, and we don't always understand each other or understand why each other thinks a different way. But it's always good to find out, because we learn from that, and sometimes we learn that maybe they're more right than we are. So I say I've had a lot of conversations with people who are not professionals, people who are not criminal profiles, people who are not detectives, and sometimes I've learned things from them, and I go, wow, you had something to teach me that I didn't learn professionally. So I think it's just so everybody is something.
Well, I'm learning from you. I am, Pat, I'm going to go away, and I am going to contemplate the Smith sighting. And I'll be getting back to you on that, because I mean, obviously, I totally respect your opinion, and we have different opinions, but I do want to see your side. So I'm going to work on that. And I'm going to thank Shirley. Shirley, are you there?
I am.
Oh, good. We have the little 2-second wait while she gets to her mute button. But thank you so much for what you've done, Shirley. I've seen you put up so many of the comments, and I want to go through and maybe save some of them for the next time Pat's on, because if she will come on again, because there were so many important comments.
This was fun. I enjoyed this, Lizzie, very much. I mean, it's Saturday in coronavirus land, and I had such a full engagement today. So many appointments and things to do outside.
Well, after spending our Friday night together, I mean, why not spend Saturday as well?
Exactly.
And
we can take a whole weekend together.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. Oh, today is Peter Hyatt's birthday. Well, happy birthday,
Peter.
Happy birthday, Peter. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I'd spoken to him, and he has agreed. He did suggest coming on, and that's absolutely great. I'm so lucky. This is over the years I've done this, and I couldn't have believed that I would be doing this now. I mean, I just love it. I'm so happy. Thank you for Chris and Kim for giving me the inspiration. Thank you for Pat for being here today. Thank you, mods, for everything you do, including Carrie giving all the links. And I'm not sure if she managed to get the link to your interview, but if she didn't, I will make sure I put it in the description. And Emily, who's always here with us, thank you. There's so many people. I mean, there's just so many people to thank. I can't go through them all, but I think it's time. Oh, and Andy Hopkins. Oh my goodness. So if Andy's here, I mean, let's not say any more about him in the naughty bar. I mean, Andy's always in a naughty bar. So anyway, well, once again, thank you so much, Pat. I'm gonna play out with, I think I was gonna play both parts of the video of you going to Praia de Luz, but I've just loved listening to you. So I'm just gonna play out with the second part of the video that I did for you when you visited Praia de Luz, and say goodbye to everybody. And and yes, thank you, Kerry, for pointing out to me that Cherry in Heidi Ho Controversy, she does this every week. She bumps all the posts that are relative to what we're talking about. And that is so great. So people in there can actually see all the information. And Cherry is so great. I am so lucky with my admin. I'll tell you, I couldn't be more blessed. Well, so thanks, Cherry, if you're listening.
It's been Lizzie, I've never done this particular version of a show, and it's been really easy. And of course, I always think you're a really great interviewer. So, I don't know why you haven't been in this business, because believe me, I've been with some people, and you did avoid just saying, so what do you think about Maddie? You Ross, really keep the conversation going and bring up good points, and it's very special to have a good interviewer. So I think you're in the right business. You should be doing this. You're really good. I've been doing very well.
Well, we'll question on that. I just love that I got. Well, hi, Pat Brown. What's your thoughts on Maddie? We discussed that last night, and she said that's the worst question anybody can ask. So that's why I had to ask it.
It's like, you're like, huh? Could you ask something more specific? Like, give me something to work with. It's like, what do you think about? So it's our long range joke, but you're not that kind of interviewer. So I just really enjoyed it.
We got that over and done with. We got it over and done with. So thanks so much, Pat. I just loved having you on, and I know everybody else has loved having you on. So I'm going to say goodbye, and thanks to everybody. Rest in peace, Rod, my ex-brother-in-law, and thanks to Chris and Kim for giving me the motivation to do this. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to end with this second part of the video I did for you back when you visited Praia de Luz. So thanks, Pat. We'll see you later. Okie dokie. Okay. And thanks, Shirley. Okay. Good night.
Good night.
A computer-aged photo of missing girl Madeleine McCann. Now, this is what she might look like today at the age of 9, 5 years after she disappeared while on vacation with her family in Portugal. British investigators think that it is possible Madeleine is still alive, and they have launched a massive review of more than 40,000 pieces of evidence. Joining us now, criminal profiler Pat Brown, and Pat is writing a book on the McCann case. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Sandy.
So Scotland Yard wants to reopen the investigation, and they're saying the evidence suggests that Madeleine may still be alive. Do you believe it?
Well, I'm kind of wondering where they're coming up with that, because first of all, if she were kidnapped and were somewhere out there in the world, she's had her face. This is the most well-known missing child in the entire world, with tremendous publicity. Her photo has been everywhere, and she has a particular unusual eye, coloboma, which is a real standout, so that somebody would never have seen her, or that anybody would keep her around with that particular, identifying mark and run around in public with her is so unlikely that it's hard to believe that she would pop up after all this time. Also, there's a simple fact that if she were abducted, it would be most likely by a local person right in Praia de Luz. That's what all the evidence points to if it were an abduction. So we would be looking at a local child sex predator who would probably have killed her within the hour. That's what we have for all the statistics. So I'm not quite sure where they're coming from. I'm not sure what any of the evidence they're reviewed tells them that she's out there someplace, when they haven't in fact even proven an abduction, and they haven't brought the parents back in and the friends and done all the proper re-interviews, and they haven't done another crime reconstruction. I'm not quite sure where they're coming from, but there's always hope, and we have that.
Yeah, no, true. Always good to have hope. But they've built up a huge portfolio here, if you will. 37 investigators on the case now. They said that they found 195 investigative opportunities that weren't looked at, some simple, some complex, and they're only a quarter of the way through the documents. Now, I gather that whatever their investigation is in the UK, holds no sway in Portugal. All of this would have to go back to Portugal, police in Portugal, would it not?
That's correct. The Portuguese would have to reopen the case, which, by the way, can be reopened if the McCanns just ask it to be reopened. They have not done so. But yes, they would have to conduct the investigation. Now, of course, if it's true that the Met finds really great information that convinces the Portuguese police that there's something out there that they've completely overlooked, great information to say Madeleine is alive somewhere and they need to go look for her, or that she isn't alive but they could focus in on a suspect, well, they would probably do that. But I'm just not sure where they're coming from. As I said, when you review a case, you always go back to the beginning, and I don't understand why this particular investigation, this review, shall we say, has skipped the beginning and gone to looking at a massive amount of tips, because we all know that there's so many tips that come in cases, and you can just drive yourself crazy running down every one of them. So you have to go back to the evidence and review the actual crime, all the crime scene evidence, and start there.
Okay, Pat Brown, thanks so much.
Thanks, Sandy.